Hi, good evening. We're going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. If everybody could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Ms. Stowe, is there a second? Ms. Downey, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Ms. Olson, Ms. Hirsch?
Is her microphone on? Did you turn it?
It's on.
All right.
It's on.
Why don't you have that responsibility? He's great with it.
I can really good stuff like that. It's on. It's on. I didn't hear him. Aaron, can you hear us?
Megan Olson.
Megan, are you there?
I am, yes. I'm here as well.
Okay. We have a motion on the table to approve the meeting agenda. How do you guys vote?
Can you hear what Peter said?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is the consent agenda. Can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Ms. Downey, is there a second? Ms. Stowe, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Ms. Hirsch?
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up would be our school welcome. Terry?
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, board members, central office staff, and community members. On behalf of the entire ISD community, we welcome you to our school. We are fast approaching the mid-year point of a busy school year, where to date we have scheduled many enriching learning experiences for our students, staff, and parents. At the beginning of each school year, I established an umbrella theme to serve as the foundation for the events and experiences planned during the year. This year's theme is Joyful Learning for All. The driving force behind this theme was the goal of refocusing our thoughts and energies on personal satisfaction, whether to benefit our students directly or our own growth as a learner, which ultimately benefits our students. In doing so, I hope to minimize the impact of the constant barrage of negativity which bombard us and, more importantly, our students on a daily basis. These negative forces, no doubt, contribute to the higher levels of anxiety and stress that educators everywhere are seeing in students. Sadly, there is no sign of these levels receding anytime soon. To try and offset that, we at ISD are trying to focus on the positive and purposely focus on experiences that bring joy, fun, and the fuel needed to persevere. Here are some examples. This month is designated as Science Month at ISD. Although the subject is taught throughout the year, many special events are scheduled during the long and often dreary month of January to celebrate the discoveries and wow moments that interacting with science brings. In addition to the 2 science nights scheduled for parents and children to attend, we have high-quality vendors such as High Touch High Tech visiting our 1st and 4th grade classrooms, as well as the Connecticut Science Center bringing their engaging presentations to several grade levels. All these experiences are designed to support our GPS units and provide hands-on experiences for our students to learn from and enjoy. Our 5th graders, under the tutelage of our media specialist Jane Martellino, recently participated in an old-fashioned Battle of the Books, where students showcased their knowledge of books that they read. Our winning team will now compete with 5 other schools in the district next Thursday evening at Central Middle School at 6:30 p.m. The winning team will receive a large trophy, which they will keep until next year's event. And it has to be a large trophy. Our 5th graders also just recently began their exhibition experience, a requirement for 5th graders at an IB school to undertake. The theme this year is positivity. Use your optimism to change the world. They are working hard at conducting research on a topic they feel passionate about that falls under the umbrella theme. To celebrate the Chinese Lunar New Year, the students and staff will be treated to a dance celebration tomorrow afternoon, which promises to be joyful and entertaining, as well as informative. The dance will be performed by a large group of our students who were instructed by 3 of our parents during after-school rehearsal sessions. Later on in the spring, our own March Madness bracket will become a school-wide reading event. It will incorporate books of humor to keep the friendly contest light and amusing for all. Keeping the learning positive for staff is also a commitment this year. During this last year of our current strategic plan, we are fully meshed in personalizing learning for our students. In providing them more choices, options, and more voice in shaping their instruction, learning potential appears to be optimized. The 2 walkthroughs conducted in our Wave 3 classrooms to date yielded very high levels of student engagement and genuine interest and concentration in what they were learning. The learning continues. At last week's faculty meeting, Jane Martellino led us in a workshop on a teaching technique called Question Technique Formulation, which will allow teachers to guide groups of students to generate their own questions and select the more powerful ones, reach through consensus to facilitate their learning. The workshop was very well received, as evidenced by expressions of interest in using the technique in their instruction. Parents, too, are being offered opportunities to grow. Yesterday, Dr. Fabien Bois, one of the district's talented psychologists, delivered an excellent presentation to a large group of parents on how mindfulness can offset the levels of stress and anxiety. He shared specific strategies and resources for parents to use at home. Yes, it is almost the midpoint of the year, but we look forward to the many other events coming to support our students' learning and achievement, but also with the goal of couching them in enjoyment and renewal. In closing, we wish you a productive meeting this evening. As we embark on a new year and a new decade, we wish you good health, prosperity, and your own personal attempts at attaining joyful learning. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the snacks outside. I presume that's the PTA.
Thank you to the PTA, yes.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is our public hearing. First, we'll hear from the GHS student government.
Good evening, members of the board, the cabinet, Dr. Jones, and members of the community. I'm Lucas Gazianis, the senior class president at Greenwich High School, and I hope you all enjoyed a restful holiday break and positive start to the new year. So let me begin by thanking everyone who showed up to our senior class fundraiser at Chipotle last Saturday. It was very successful, and I'm delighted that so many people were able to come together to support our class. In case any of you are interested, the junior class is also having a Riverside Chipotle fundraiser on Wednesday, February 5th from 5 to 9 p.m. And the freshman class is busy fundraising as well, and you can support them by buying from Fairfield Pizza on Sunday, February 2nd, all day. Now that our sponsored announcements are out of the way, let me update you on the blood drive that student government hosted in coordination with the Red Cross last month. Our students were really eager to donate, and we were able to fill all the donation slots ahead of time. Ultimately, 23 units of blood were collected, which is successful considering that we had a delayed school start that caused all sorts of scheduling complications. We're planning to host another blood drive in April when we are much less likely to be thwarted by snow, and we have nothing but the highest expectations for that one as well. Thank you to William Owens, our VP of Community Service, and Jennifer Lynch, our Student Government Advisor, for working extremely hard to make the blood drive happen. We were also grateful to hear this week from the Greenwich High PTA, whose courtyard improvement project has been postponed until the next budget year due to the potential redesign of our front entranceway. The PTA is very willing to hear our students' ideas for uses of the space in this year's budget created by this development. We truly value how receptive they are, and will be communicating with them extensively throughout the next couple months to collaborate on some meaningful projects. A dedicated team of seniors is now working diligently to make SRO, our senior show, an extravagant production. I told you all last meeting that we had chosen the theme of Class of 2020 Vision, But now I can update you that several skits have been written and are currently in development. Music has been chosen for many dances, and we're compiling a slideshow of our classmates' memories of GHS. We're working to engage as many people as possible in our class in SRO, and I once again ask you to spread the word to anyone who might be interested in seeing or being a part of it. It's set to be a memorable show, and I encourage you to come out on March 5th and 6th. In other news, and finally, our executive committee has decided to amend the number of signatures needed to bring a policy paper before student government, reducing it from 100 to 50. We want to create as productive an environment as possible for our student gov reps to bring forward their ideas, and we believe that this change will cause even more of them to actively pursue solutions to whatever issues are important to them. To give you just a small sense of the breadth of subcommittees that are active right now, we have everything from a project that's trying to optimize pickup and drop-off from ride-sharing services at the high school to one that seeks to help fund hospitals to fight pediatric cancer, which holds bake sales every few weeks. The things that are coming out of student government right now are exciting, and we're doing everything we can to help foster as much initiative as possible in our reps. That concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you, and I look forward to returning next month. Now please stay tuned for our student body president, Mr. Zane Cotter.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Jones, members of the board, administrators, parents, cabinet, and wonderful citizens of Greenwich. Good evening and welcome. I am Zane Cotter, the student body president of Greenwich High School, and happy new decade, by the way. As we move into that new decade, there is undoubtedly the presence of visionary sentiment with regard to how we can plan for the future. And the two course proposals on the agenda tonight are a clear indication that education overall is evolving to meet the ever-demanding needs of the growing 21st century world. But as our access to data increases as a result of new technological developments, so too does the inclination to rely more heavily on standardized test scores as a measure of success. I'd like to make an argument that has already been made before. We should probably take a more holistic approach to measuring student success. And I know I'm sounding like a college admissions officer with the whole holistic thing, but I've come to realize that there's a bit of a disconnect between how the district and students perceive success. In class, we are taught you are not a test score, but it seems like testing metrics are given more attention than student and teacher satisfaction with their courses. Take the midterm metric, for instance. For the past 2 years, I've collected data directly before and after students took their midterms, and have found some frightening results. In both years that we administered the survey, a little more than 2/3 of respondents indicated that they, quote unquote, did not believe that their midterm grades on average honestly reflected their academic ability. And while I cannot speak to what the general teacher opinion is on that question, from anecdotal experience, I can only surmise that many teachers feel the same way. And beyond whether or not midterms in their current format are necessary or not, the point remains that 2/3 of students effectively believe that their abilities are not being properly represented by a testing metric that many administrators believe to be accurate. And that fact in and of itself is a massive problem. Now, I might be optimistically misguided into believing this, but I think that a successful school system is one that has its students and faculty fully invested into its assessment strategy. Yet I have been told by a statistically significant amount of people, and have personally witnessed teachers who were openly discontent with the curriculum they were teaching. In fact, I recall one teacher specifically complaining about how the new AP curriculum for their course removed all of the interesting components of that topic. And another teacher who said that their honors class was the perfect example of how that particular subject should be taught, as opposed to the curriculum of the AP version of that class, which supposedly doesn't go into enough depth. That's right, an AP course supposedly doesn't go into enough depth. And I don't mean to over-criticize our testing metrics. I think that to a certain extent, they're actually a very easy way to measure achievement in class. And I can understand from an administrative perspective why they're valuable. But I'd urge the board and community to advocate for a more comprehensive approach to measuring student success as part of the new strategic plan that includes more metrics pertaining to how students and teachers actually feel about their learning. Just as new econometric models are being used to measure domestic success, like the Social Progress Index, we too should also consider new ways of measuring student success through the lens of satisfaction and well-being, if we are to continue progressing in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up are GEA comments. Carol Sutton.
Good evening, Principal Ricci, Chairman Bernstein, and board members, Dr. Jones, cabinet members, and members of the community. My name is Carol Sutton, and I'm honored to represent 900 members of the Greenwich Education Association, and to wish everyone, for the second time this year, Happy New Year. It's gratifying to see so many in attendance this evening, including my GEA colleagues. Stepping up to support our kids, our schools, and the future of public education is certainly a resolution worth keeping. This evening, I'll be speaking briefly on 3 agenda items and 1 important non-agenda item. First, I expected a very large crowd on Cardinal Stadium. So pretend the room is full, and I'm going to say, let's get it done. Make this crowd happy. Okay. Next, on screen time. We appreciate that the district is committed to the philosophy that a digital device is one tool among many tools available for teaching and learning in Greenwich. Teachers are making purposeful decisions about when and how to integrate technology in their lessons and striving for a balance between using online and offline materials. 5 years into the digital learning environment, teachers are embracing the digital toolbox and other materials, and students are moving between the digital and analog worlds with ease in their classrooms. But let's be honest. When it comes to screen time, the passive uses, like monitoring social media, sharing funny cat videos, and binging Netflix shows, are powerfully attractive pursuits for all of us, including when we know we should be doing something else. GEA appreciates that the DLE update presented by Ms. Parisi concludes by stressing the role that all adults play in monitoring and modeling digital citizenship, both in school and out of school. The schools can't do it alone on this topic. Third, on the strategic plan update. In your strategic plan, the goal for faculty satisfaction is an 80% positive rating on the Panorama survey. We are currently at 53%, which is down 5% from 2 years ago. For GEA, this is disheartening, to say the very least. And so the association took it upon itself to learn the story behind this number. We consulted with our elected officers, our building representatives, and our members over the past couple months. And an overarching concern emerged that the way special education is staffed and supported in Greenwich is adversely affecting every school, every student, and every teacher. Specifically, we found that disturbing incidents like evacuations occur on a far too frequent basis. Board members, an evacuation is when the entire class leaves the classroom because of a classmate's emotional or physical breakdown. Sometimes they last a long time. We found that teachers and other adults are physically injured by students on a regular basis. We have protocols in place. They go to employee health. They sometimes need to stay out on workers' comp. We also found that students are not getting their services. And why is this? From our perspective as teachers, there are not enough paraprofessionals, professionals, or specialized support staff in place. Faculty members do not have enough specialized training to deal with the issues that present themselves to them on a daily basis. And a continuum of services, a full continuum of services to support the needs of our students is simply not available outside of the high school. Board members, Dr. Jones, our teachers are committed to the success of all students. It's why they teach. And that's also why more than a handful are sobbing in the parking lot every day. As always, we are here to work with you to address these concerns and to ensure the success of all of our students and all of our faculty. We welcome the opportunity to speak with Key to Ed, and many teachers already have. But we also believe that the board and the community needs to hear from us directly. On February 20th, GEA will return to specifically address our concerns and to present our ideas and goals for the future. So thank you for giving GEA the opportunity to speak each and every meeting, and we look forward to a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cricket Diamond, PTA Council.
Good evening, Superintendent Jones, Principal Ricky, Chairman Bernstein, members of the board, cabinet, and community. My name is Cricket Diamond, and I am the president of Greenwich PTA Council. We want to focus our time this evening on two topics. One, understanding our support for school-related investments, and two, providing a perspective on opportunities for additional parent involvement, especially in the area of digital learning and screen time. So it's January, which typically means that it's really cold outside, so it was rather odd that it was 70 degrees last weekend and all of Greenwich went to the beach. Whether it's 70 or it's 40, January in Greenwich always means that it is budget season. Council supports essential investments in our schools. These investments fuel our children's education and ultimately build the fabric of our community. We support your efforts to ensure that our school environments are intellectually stimulating, safe and healthy spaces. This means funding required maintenance and necessary updating at all of our schools, both inside and out. Tonight you will vote on Cardinal Stadium. GHS PTA and Council support the contemplated phases of the entire project, the restrooms, changing facilities, and ADA accessibility for the stadium, bleachers, and press box, and the secondary egress and exit to the campus. Let's get it done. Moving on to opportunities for parental involvement, three immediately come to mind. Participating in the development of the new strategic plan, understanding specifics on curriculum, and having our voices heard on digital learning and screen time. Parents would love to be involved in the process of the strategic plan. We would appreciate the opportunity to have input through community forums and focus groups. On curriculum, parents are eager to understand specifics. We applaud the district for planning a night to focus on curriculum. A planned foundations workshop is also a great example of engaging parents. Tonight, we will hear a report on screen time and digital learning. Parents want to be involved in discussions on digital citizenship and understanding just how much the children are on their devices. Unfortunately, the report on screen time was rather disappointing to many on PTA Council. The report does not address frequently stated parent concerns in several areas. First, the report is concerning because the district is saying that they have no way of measuring use at the elementary level. On page 5, it states, at the elementary level, it is difficult to deliver app usage information as Apple has not provided a systemic way to gather this information from their environment. On page 8, it states, the effective use of technology in our schools requires careful management and oversight by both school staff as well as parents. Can we claim that there is an effective use of technology in our schools? A well-known business quote states, "You can't manage what you don't measure." Can we really claim careful management and oversight? Second, the report states that teachers are expected to gradually develop intermediate to advanced proficiency for the DLE Digital Toolbox applications. How is this expectation managed? How does the district ensure this expectation doesn't turn into technology use for technology's sake? Third, there does not appear to be a documented statement of policy defining acceptable in-class screen time. If there is, why is it not stated in the report? Regarding use, elementary school parents are concerned about the appropriateness and effectiveness of device use in the younger grades. As we have mentioned before, children in K-2 do not bring their devices home, so there is no way for parents to monitor, and they are reliant on the district to monitor usage. Fourth, while there are expectations of use on page 4 for several power applications and dashboards, there is no context about what portion of students' time is spent on these applications versus on other applications. Are these expectations set by the developers of the apps? The source of the expectations is not footnoted. Can the district provide that research? Some parents are becoming increasingly wary of claims and research by technology-related entities, especially those who have a vested interest to justify their app's use. And finally, all of these questions lead to the larger context on the demonstration of effectiveness. We encourage the district to take this a step further to demonstrate how effective the use of digital devices has been in achieving learning goals. We look forward to future updates on this topic. We end this evening with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. in honor of his birthday on Monday. "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education." We are all proud of the Greenwich Public School focus on both intense critical thinking and character development. Thank you for your continued service to our shared goals.
Thank you, Cricket. All right, next up is our community comments. Speakers will get 3 minutes. You'll get a 30-second warning. We'd ask that you stick to the time because we do have an agenda we want to get to. If somebody said something that you were going to say, you can give a thumbs up and we can keep this moving. Thank you, sir. All right, our first speaker is Elizabeth Dempsey, followed by Rick Kroll. Okay, Elizabeth, are you here? All right, Rick, if you want to come down. Following Rick will be Scott Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members. I rise this evening to speak on behalf of the Greenwich Athletic Foundation. Our board met via conference call this afternoon and asked me to speak this evening on behalf of the GAF. So what I'm conveying tonight has been discussed by the board of the GAF, and excuse me, we are here tonight to support the project at this stage as was voted upon by the special committee that voted to move forward with the bleacher improvements for both the home and visitor side, the access, driveway, bridge, and associated components and rooms that were being placed under the bleachers as voted on by the commission at its meeting and forwarded to this group before the last special meeting, if you will. We see tonight that there are some motions to split the project, to try and bifurcate some things due to the application process. We have some concerns with that. We believe at this point in time it's been unfair to approach certain public officials about a project at this stage that is not in anybody's scheme here tonight, really completed to a point that we can get good decisions from any of those officials or anybody in this room for that matter. Some of the engineering work that still needs to be done and understood before we would know how a permit would have to be filed for them. So with those things coming to light and the fact that the Board of Ed has spent so much time on this, we feel that it is not really in your expertise, and we would like to see you move forward in taking care of the things that are important to our children, and that the construction of the Cardinal Stadium and associated roads and things be put in the hands of some folks down the road that would have that kind of expertise, and move the project forward as a complete project, and get the engineering work done that needs to be completed as part of the next phase, so we can fully understand the drainage, the engineering, and where it all go into the wetlands, so that the proper application could be followed, and that we're ensured as that application process is followed, that it is ironclad and it has followed the complete town process, so that as we emerge with the approvals, there is no risk of any sort, again, excuse me, any sort of appeal from the neighbors. Thank you. And in so doing, that's the best insurance policy we as supporters, you as the Board of Ed, and we as a community can have to ensure that this project will follow a succinct track and be assured that we can get it constructed as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next up is Scott Griffith, followed by Diana Martinez. I know Elizabeth will get you when you're... Yeah.
Hello, I'm Scott Griffith. On behalf of the PTAC committee that works on advanced studies in ALP, we thank the board for looking intensively back on the November meeting at the elementary ALP science, advanced science program. Today, our committee would also recommend that the board take a look at two other issues that are important for advanced science. First, we'd encourage the board to add a third, more advanced science option at the middle school. And secondly, we'd encourage the board to work with the GPS administration to set clear parameters on how students should be selected for advanced studies programs going forward. If you look back a decade ago, GPS middle schoolers didn't have any real science choice. There was Science 6 in sixth grade, 7, and Science 8. The BOA then directed the creation of the advanced science courses called Science 6A, 7A, and 8A. However, many students today report that there's little to differentiate Science 6A, 7A, and 8A from Science 6, 7, and 8. The board received an update on the Advanced Science 6 pilot back in June of 2017. In it, it reported that the 2016-2017 year, it was the second year of the Science 6A pilot, a good 50% of the GPS sixth graders were already being placed into Science 6A. Middle school science teachers report that even higher percentages of 7th graders and 8th graders are now in Science 7A and 8A classes. Science 6A, 7A, and 8A are now the science classes for the majority of students, largely due to the selection process. This selection process is based on many factors, but it includes how the students did in the grade 5th science classes, the scores on their science notebooks, and also nominations from teachers and parents. With many parents nominating their kids, many of these nominations being accepted, the Science 6A, 7A, and 8A are now become the de facto science class in middle schools. Going forward, we would like to make the following recommendations. First, the board should introduce an additional, more rigorous science class to the middle school curriculum. Science 6, 7, and 8, and also 6A, 7A, and 8A can remain as they are, but a more challenging level could be added as a third option, akin to how sixth graders now have 3 different math options, Math 6, Math 6A, and pre-algebra. Secondly, we'd recommend that the board work closely with the administration to figure out some parameters to be used in the selection process for advanced studies going forward.
30 seconds.
This would both be at the elementary school level and the middle school level. We believe that implementing these changes would further strengthen the already excellent reputation that advanced sciences and ALP programs in Greenwich already have. But more importantly, it would also allow the advanced science learners here to dig more deeply with greater depth into this important subject area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next up, Diana Martinez, followed by Carolyn Lerum.
Good evening. As we look more closely at special education processes in the district, I would ask that the district provide professional development about what it means to be a part of a PPT team. Being part of a PPT team should not mean participating in groupthink. I'm speaking as both a former teacher at Greenwich Public Schools and a parent of 2 children who receive services in the district. I left teaching because I couldn't advocate for my students with special needs the way I could advocate for my sons. Advocating for other people's children is risky business in this district, and it shouldn't be. It involves telling parents to take up more space in a system intent on shrinking that space, or reserving it for those who can obtain advocates or lawyers, to force the administration to concede that space. Advocating for other people's kids would involve letting parents in on a secret code of exactly what to say or write and to whom. I needed a back channel though, because it involved going against the PPT team of my school, which was headed by the very administrator who completed my evaluations, who decided which classes I taught, who decided whether I had my own classroom or floated between multiple classrooms, who decided what extra duties I had during the day. In short, it was suicide. Prior to a PPT with parents in Greenwich, the teachers and administrators hold a PST. This is a meeting to discuss the issues that will come up in the PPT and to gain consensus among educators. It sounds logistically necessary for the sake of sharing information, but we run the risk of predetermination. Predetermination is when PPT decisions are made prior to the meeting without the parents' participation, and it happens in this district. In PPTs and in other team meetings, there's no protocol for teachers to challenge administrators. By law, teachers can disagree with the outcome of a PPT just as parents can. They can document their disagreement by filing a dissent. But in 20 years of teaching, never seen that happen. Recently, a new law protects teachers from a school system retaliating against them for challenging the administrator in a decision during the PPT process. Shouldn't we wonder why such a law was necessary? When I tried to get students tested for disabilities, I was told to follow the protocol. That meant letting students struggle in an RTI process that could take years, even though it was only supposed to take a few weeks. I was told to create a goal for that child, something like explicitly teaching that child how to find the main idea, even though the child struggled with self-regulation or struggled with fluency. In a sense, I was given a fool's errand to buy time. The system communicates to us our responsibility to be team players in many ways. Veteran teachers and administrators encourage us to only use a child's initials when communicating about a student's struggles, for fear that using the child's actual name could cause correspondence to turn up in a FERPA request.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, next speaker is Caroline Leram, followed by Elizabeth Jency.
Good evening. We are growing concerned about the validity of the Key to Ed's independence. When Key to Ed presented at Cascade School just this week, we learned how Key to Ed trained Greenwich Public Schools 15 years ago. We also learned that the special education director hand-selected this organization. Further, Key to Ed presented a video intended to inform parents on how PPT meetings should be run. What was very disturbing was that the video only illustrated how an uneventful IEP is run with no disagreements or conflict. Several parents at the meeting stated that this is very far from how PPTs are conducted throughout GPS, and they remain confused on how to advocate for their children amid such conflict they experience with GPS administrators. Further, the parents were informed that only 3 staff members from each building will receive this training. In a separate occurrence, during a recent Key to Ed interview, a parent asked to see the interviewer's notes, which showed how diligent notes were taken on much of the conversation, but omitted any and all comments about the parents' experiences with the chief PPS officer. Then, through further discussion, the Key to Ed interview disclosed that the chief PPS officer hired Key to Ed. The Key to Ed interviewer also stated, quote, "The chief PPS officer would not have hired us if she did not want change." We are concerned with this statement because our understanding had been that Key to Ed was identified and hired independently and acting independently. We were told that we were brought in to meet with stakeholders, to gather unbiased data and present that data. But what parents are reporting is that many of their comments are not being included in this data. There should be a detailed description of the procurement process that resulted in Key to Ed as the selection, such as other groups that were considered, and how those groups were involved in the process. And most importantly, we want to make sure that every voice and concern is heard, and that this isn't a selective report. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the next and last speaker signed up is Elizabeth Dempsey. If there's anybody else that wishes to address the board, I'd ask that you go stand off to the side and be ready to go.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Dempsey, and as many of you know, I live across from Greenwich High School, and I'm here just to ask for that the Phase 2 have a simultaneous start that's separated from Phase 1 so that Cardinal Stadium can proceed swiftly, but that there might be a way to do a simultaneous start with Phase 2. Reasons why we ask for that is there's a multitude of reasons. The first would be that you would save tax dollars doing a single wetlands review. Remediation work has to be done for both phases, so combining it all together would work best to reduce costs. Building and management costs, while some of it may be finished earlier, you might be able to have some contiguous building at the same time and get some of the building done before building costs rise even further. I was pleased in the last meeting that was held that to find out that the committee had recommended this, and that the stream of people that came up and spoke about it were also 100% positive about getting the road built. I mean, half of it will already be built for Phase 1, so we're really just looking at that second half. The reason why neighbors are advocating it is because it would reduce the pressure and the traffic and the mayhem that's on Hillside Road. I'm on the traffic and parking committee, and the GHS staff and GPD and the security staff have done an amazing job at helping the process so far. It's much better than it was. But I also wanted to bring to light today the fact that yesterday the state informed Greenwich DPW that the projected date for start to rebuild what is essentially a bridge under East Putnam. What most of you may not realize is that as you approach Hillside from the east, right as it meets, as you approach Hillside on East Putnam, underneath East Putnam is a large bridge that's going to have to be built. And so for 2 years, traffic will be reduced to a single lane going both ways. And if you can only imagine parents' nights, graduation, or God forbid, an emergency, it's going to be 2 years of hell. I live not too far from that, so it won't be too bad, but it is something really to consider in this phase. Meanwhile, there's also projected to be a small bubble of enrollment around the same time. So I really think that we all should just take the momentum and get it all done, make it separate so that Cardinal Stadium can be set. The other thing is that the Phase 2 remediation is going to be an incredible process, and I do think having that second access point will be helpful. And lastly, just from a logical standpoint, we all know that there are security issues that need to be addressed at GHS, and having a community of almost 3,000 people there with one form of egress just doesn't make sense, and we really don't want to have any potential problem be exacerbated by an egress issue. So thank you for consideration.
Thank you. So if there's anybody else that wishes to address the board, come down, please state your name.
Hi, Lindsay Fahey. I've been here before. I didn't get to hear the Key to Ed comments. I came in a little bit late, so perhaps I'm going to be repeating some of them. Apologies. I had the pleasure of meeting Joyce Little for an hour and 50 minutes, even though most people were allotted 30 minutes to 50 minutes, and got a great amount of time to talk to her about the process, how it worked, etc. I was greatly dismayed and made clear to her what she said about the process and how that was so incredibly different from what we had heard repeatedly from both the Board of Ed and Ms. Jones directly. We were told that, historically, special education parents have been recipients of surveys that have predetermination, right? People within PPS make the decisions of which parents are able to be spoken to, because those are the parents who have no issues, right? So we're getting these unlikely stories coming forward of everything being perfectly fine when there are people who do not feel the same way. So when I spoke to her, she told me explicitly that Mary Ford had been the person who had initiated the process. She said that that they had known each other since at least 1997, had been colleagues. She said that Mary had asked for it because people who had died, and she didn't have enough people who had gone through the same process 10 years ago, and that she was invested in the process as a result, that this beta project was not being paid for except for $3,000, which was being used for expenses only, which was not sufficient, seeing as they're from Tennessee. And what really, I have to say, bothered me is that the process is entirely broken. What she told me was that Mary and the individual assistant principals and principals had made the decision of which parents were chosen to be on the committee. Then the committee had the right to determine what topics would be discussed. So those were set out in a 6-page document that was sent to individual parents who were then going to have these conversations. The conversations were only allowed to speak about the topics that were decided by these few number of parents, which notably, she told me specifically that they are not allowing the parents who are on the committee to be made public, despite telling me at the same time that we're supposed to be talking to these parents who are on the committee so that we can put our voices forward, and so they'll know and be able to put it forward into the process. She said explicitly that was the agreement with Mary Ford, that those names would never be released. I've never spoken to the person who is my representative, yet I happen to know who she is. And I have to say that the whole process was just broken, because if they're deciding what the topics are, those 6 pages, I'm only allowed to talk about those. Then it goes back to those people, as she told me. It goes back to that same committee of people to make the decision on which ones are the most important. And what she told me is that 6 topics will be decided from that committee, and that Mary Ford will be able to choose 2 that she cares about, which will be affected and changed. In Ms. Jones' email, it says that the group will come up with 2.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, is there anybody else that wishes to address the board? If not, we'll go ahead and we'll close our community comments and move on to the next portion of our agenda, which is our monthly report, starting with the superintendent.
Thank you. First of all, as noted earlier, we are starting our exam time at the high school, which is obviously busy and stressful for a lot of our kids and parents. Parents, yes, and our teachers. We did have our public hearing last night on fields 6 and 7, was quite well attended, and we're very hopeful that DEEP and EPA will continue to move them along. Next week, as mentioned by the high school, we do have a curriculum forum. And the curriculum forum, again, was a request of the PTA at one of the PTAC meetings, really just an open Q&A to have lots of questions and answers. We will do a very quick overview of foundations is at the very beginning, and then also just an overview of where all the resources are on the website that we've been adding this year. We did have the Key to Ed here this week for IEP facilitation, and I had this on my notes to go ahead and talk about, but since it was mentioned, I will take the opportunity. I thought it was an excellent training, and one of the reasons that we're having them here is because we want to work on our process. So what we saw and what I saw was a much more collaborative process that they were presenting for us to then model after. And I was in a conversation the very next day with some of the staff, and one of the concerns is how do we do what they showed us, because it is more time intensive, and we are training all of our administrators. We want a collaborative PPT process, and that really was the intent of the evening. So we know that we don't look like what they're presenting. They're presenting what we should look like and what we want to look like. I'll also just add that Key to Ed, this is not our audit, this is not our review. We have money in the budget where we do that next year. This is a consultant who, instead of sitting idle between now and July 1, assuming our budget goes through and we have money if we want to do a deeper audit, this is to be gathering information and hearing from a broad band of stakeholders. And we would not have Key to Ed in this district as a consultant if I didn't feel like their work was going to bring great value, not only to me, but I think to the whole department. And I really, truly am very excited about the work they're doing. I'm disappointed to hear that it feels like maybe some people aren't having a good experience, because up until literally today, everything I've heard has been really positive because people feel like their voices are being heard. The stakeholder group was very intentional. There's been one meeting, and it really was everybody sharing their points of view. Some of the people who are frustrated with us and give public comment are on that committee. We tried to make sure it was very balanced. Gen ed teachers, special ed teachers. There's a lot of information on the web about that committee. It's not a hidden. I took the minutes actually for the first meeting. We will have another meeting where they actually come back and share. I want to say it's between 100 and 150 interviews that they've done, and they will share all of that with us. I did have a conversation with them yesterday and was very optimistic about what they're hearing, in the sense that I think they're going to help give us some direction. You heard our own staff tonight talk about the RTI process. I think one of the parents mentioned it. I know they're hearing that from our parents just by what they shared with me yesterday. So again, I hope that people will be patient, allow the process to play out with this consultant, because it's a very unusual process where you have a consultant that meets with a number of people and is giving us all of that input. It's very, very different than any audit or review that I have ever been through in my 30 years, and I would say I think it's going to be far more valuable. So I share that with you. Last but not least, the budget is in full gear, and we will be presenting with the selectmen next week, and so that budget process is off and running, and so we encourage people to stay engaged, and if you have questions, submit them along the way. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Scherer.
Thanks for the update, Tony. Can I ask just a couple of questions? I think your clarification was helpful, and I should probably be better at reading my Key to Ed notes. But I understood this Key to Ed was because the special education staff and the prior superintendent, I guess, decided to engage UConn. And then UConn could not complete the project. So you hired these people to complete this project. Is that correct?
Kind of yes, kind of no. We actually were hoping to have both. We really wanted University of Connecticut to be able to help us do a survey with parents. We had a draft that actually went out to the PTAC special ed group. They weren't really happy with the survey. At that point, the UConn professor ended up not being able to stay with us. We were considering the Key to Ed at the same time. Is this going to be a good process? So we moved forward with Key to Ed, which I think is doing exactly what we were hoping it would do as far as gathering information.
Okay, but the real work, or at least from the board's perspective, the real work, because we've been calling for a comprehensive review, is not this.
No, we have
It's going to be, I don't want to get into the frustrations of how some former board members very cleverly pushed this through 3 years of delay, which was a great frustration to me. That happened before you were here, so it's got nothing to do with you. We're dealing with a new board now. There's only 2 of us who are, well, no, that's not fair. There's 4 of us who were from before. But, the comprehensive review is happening starting when?
If our budget goes through and on July 1,
Which I'm presuming it will. But
right, then we will put out an RFP to secure that service for next year.
So and I think we now have a board representative leading for us on special education, right? Because that was appointed. So is the plan to have, maybe this is a question to both of you, is the plan to have a session before that RFP gets written of what the board wants to have reviewed and known, what questions need to be answered, so that the scope that's put out to RFP is certain to include all that? Because I will tell you, and I think I've said this before, but I'll say this again publicly, okay? A couple times we've had to go through these reviews. One was done exceptionally well under the leadership of Sid Freund, I believe. And he brought in this is a long time ago, this is 8 years ago or whatever, he brought in 4 administrators from SUNY Oswego, I believe it was, maybe I got that wrong. They came in and did a comprehensive review. It was very independent. It was, it said what we were doing well, and it said what we were not doing well. There was a subsequent review done in the middle, and the board did not properly articulate what it was that needed to be reviewed. And unfortunately, that was actually rigged. It was completely rigged. So I understand why special ed parents are saying what they're saying. By the way, totally before you got here. There was a situation where we were asking for an audit, okay? And the audit was the department being audited selected the files that would be audited. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. So it didn't, I don't want to debate that, but it didn't come out with the meaningful information that would help us collectively, board and administrators together, which is what I think is preferred, not board versus administrators or administrators versus the board, kind of say, okay, what do we need to do and what's the right direction moving forward? So I just heard that again with this key to ed. I mean, there's some things there that just concerned me. I actually thought that you had brought these people. I was surprised to hear this comment, and I don't know what the truth is, and I don't know that it really matters. But what does matter is whatever information we get here is not the final answer, and there's going to be a comprehensive review. I guess I have one other question on that. Is there some perception that if we just do PPTs better, all is solved?
I don't think that
I worry about this fixation on facilitation of PPTs. I guess I'm trying to understand Key to Ed, because I did go to their website and I know what they say they do, but I'm sure you've hired them to do something else. How does that fit?
Right now, they are doing, it's the devising seminar, and they're also doing the PPT training. Does a cohesive and collaborative PPT process make a difference? Absolutely.
Sure, of course.
And I think we keep hearing over and over and over that the process does not feel like that for some of our families. So when I watched the training, I had not seen it until I sat through it myself. Almost all of it I was able to sit through. And it was a great process in what they were encouraging and how they will be training the staff in order to have a more collaborative process. And I think, that's when the process isn't collaborative, it does break down. So it is very much about process.
I'm sure we can always do better there, right? Because that's where the school system meets the parent around a kid. So I get that part. But I was just curious, is there this perception that that's like far and away the number one issue in special ed, or are there many others? I mean, how are we thinking about that?
I think that's why this consultant that's working with us now is going to be very, very helpful, because they're talking to so many people. And I have met with a tremendous amount of our special education parents myself. Not only a large evening group where there were a lot of people in the room, but individually. And so I'm kind of curious to see if they're hearing the same things that I've heard as I meet with parents. And RTI process, our staff recognize from the curriculum side, from the special ed side, that we don't really have a strong process system-wide. Doesn't mean there aren't some strong areas, but system-wide, that's an area that causes a lot of challenges for us.
And can I just ask one quick question? It's kind of yes or no. There is a steering committee, right, that these people are referring to?
That is the stakeholder committee. It's met one time. Okay. It actually shared kind of what was working well, what are the challenges, and again, it was just a mixed group of people.
They're public.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't imagine it would be otherwise.
No, and there's a tremendous amount. We've really tried to push out a lot of information about the process, the meeting. The information's all there.
Okay. Thanks for the update on this, on part of the superintendent's report. Appreciate that.
Yep, go ahead.
I have a couple questions as well. So I know that originally you were going to go with UConn, Tony, and then there were unforeseen circumstances, so that's when you went in the direction of Key to Ed, which I'm not sure was a board decision. And I know that you're saying that you described this as very optimistic, but what I'm hearing is actually very concerning in terms of the validity. This is supposed to be independent, unbiased. And I guess my first question is it correct that they're limiting topics to what can be discussed? Is that And I guess my second question, is it true that Mary Ford played a role in the process of, determining who would be selected? Because I guess those definitely seem quite concerning to me. So can you speak on those?
I think we worked as a team to say, how can we get a balanced group of staff that are willing to come to the meeting, that have the time to come, making sure we have the parents that are on the committee or parents we've heard from that we know have an interest in really in this topic. It is a very mixed group. So yes, somebody had to put the group together, and we did that together to make sure it was balanced. So absolutely.
So do you see it as a zero conflict of interest, or do you see there a possibility of conflict of interest there?
From my perspective, I see it zero conflict of interest in that this is a consultant company. They're not coming in to tell us what to do. They're not coming in to set direction. They're not analyzing our finances and they're going to do something unusual. They literally are gathering information from a broad group of stakeholders and staff, that includes staff that wanted to meet with them, and they're going to share with us kind of what they heard. When you talk about narrowing down the items, that really is coming from the stakeholder group after they've shared what they've heard. It's figuring out what are one or two things that immediately we could really start to work on, because I've been very transparent in saying that as we look at improving our process, it does not happen overnight for anything. And special education process, it will take time for us to figure out whether that's programmatic, whether that's the PPT process, and it will take time. So they're trying to help us say, here are one or two things where to start if we want to be able to make a more collaborative and cohesive process for all.
I'm just not hearing that from the actual parents, so that's why there's a gross disconnect between what you're reporting out and the transparency and the lack of that is independent, unbiased data, and then I'm really questioning the validity. So I think that's something, I know as a board member, this is not what I had in mind, and I'm sure, maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but it seems like others have the same concerns on the board. Feel free to speak up, ask questions as well, anybody else, but there's a disconnect here. So I think it's time we reevaluate.
Yeah, I just want to say again,
Megan, if you're done, this is Karen, and I also have a comment.
Yeah, I just want to be really clear, though, there is no data.
Hold on, guys.
I just want to be really clear, there is no data that anybody, if they're talking about when they're in a one-on-one interview and the notes that they're taking, but no data has been presented to us. We don't have that yet. They will be, the devising seminar group will be here at I want to say, is that our next meeting? They will be here to talk to the board. So I don't know if they'll have the actual report ready by then, but there isn't any data right now. So when we talk about the integrity of the data, and I think one of the best aspects of transparency is the staff, we haven't been involved in these interviews. I have no idea what their notes say. I don't know who the 100 and 150 people are they've met with. We don't have any of that information, and we don't intend to ever get it.
Right. So at this point, I don't know the data. Maybe data is the wrong word to use at this point, but I do know that people are feeling pigeonholed. That's what I'm hearing time and time again. People are limited to what topics they can discuss. That's gonna in some way steer the data in a certain direction that will be quote unquote optimistic for you and Mary, et cetera. So that's my question, my concern. Sorry, Karen.
Ms. Hirsch.
Yeah, sorry. I had a quick question. I have some serious concerns in regards to what Jamie shared with us in regards to the Key to Ed meeting. If there is any hint of the fact that these may not be being done in an independent nature, and that any of the information is not being translated back to us, and or it is going to be connected to individual parents or other topics, I think that this is a concern, and this is something that we have heard time and time again. I know Mr. Scherer just had reiterated the fact, saying the past two looks we've had our special education department, at least the most recent one a few years ago, was tainted by the fact that we had had feedback saying that some of the materials have been handpicked for, this. And I know we requested to have a meeting to go over some of the special education discussion for outplacement and other things. I think that I'd really like to add this to it, and I think, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask that we look for a date sooner, much rather than later, to add that as an executive session. I have grave concerns about this. We cannot have another special education review or process where we're looking to fix problems that parents who already have concerns feel that they're not being heard, or they're going to, this is now being stated publicly in the meeting. Parents are not going to want to come forward and be open and honest in discussions because they'll be fearful, and that's a problem for me. It's a major problem.
Thank you. I'll just add my 2 cents basically onto what Peter had said earlier. I think Key to Ed is one piece of a process. I'm more looking forward to the complete soup to nuts review next year, from identification all the way to provision of services. This is one snapshot in the middle. All right. With that, why don't we move on to our reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. We'll start down at this end. Joe, I don't know if you have anything. Kathleen?
Sure. Policy committee, we're sort of back at it. Changing courses a little bit. I think I mentioned in the last meeting, we adopted so many K policies. We're kind of good for now. And we're going to do our best to actually do a crosswalk between our old policies and our new policies over the coming months to make sure everything is there. And the only other thing we didn't do under CAVE, I should note though, in terms of adopting new policies, were a few 2000s, which will come back to the board in a couple weeks, but also the missions, goals, and objective sections. And I think that's important because we're going to be working on with the strategic planning committee, hopefully on that. So it's sort of perfect. That's the one area that we didn't do. We can sort of marry those two together. Secondly, finance board, we have not had a chance to meet yet, but of course we have our new CFO. So we're gonna give him like another few days. And then I hope to maybe meet with him. We're gonna hopefully find some time to meet in the next week or two before we start, having to sell our budget around town. So that's that.
Ms. Kowalski, do you have anything?
Sure. So I have an update with respect to the lunch services committee. We have, I've had several phone calls with some members, as well as we had a meeting earlier today. I think that we have a clear agenda going forward as to the approaches that we want to take. We're exploring 3 different options that we will look at as most particularly for feasibility and cost components, which include the dishwashers all at one location and possibly a hybrid of that, picking 2, as well as putting dishwashers in each of the schools and understanding the capabilities that we can do there and pros and cons. And then the 3rd option that was discussed today, which was completely outsourcing the entire tray concept, which may have a higher cost but may also limit some of the extra concerns that have been raised with having dishwashers and at one location versus multiple locations with personnel issues. So we have, I think, a clear agenda and a task list put together that Anne is helping us work through, and hopefully we will be able to present more to the committee, the board in the near future.
Ms. Downey, anything? Mr. Scher, I know we've got strategic plan coming up. Do you want to wait until then? All right. Ms. Olson, do you have anything to report?
I do, yes. So Distinguished Teachers Awards Committee will be meeting again this Tuesday afternoon at Havermeyer. And just to get the dates out there again, thank you, first of all, to Patricia Carey for continuing to get all the information out there to everybody. It's time to nominate. Nomination packet deadlines will be due March 12th by 5 o'clock. The Distinguished Teachers announced they'll be announced on April 22nd, and then the big ceremony, which is always a great celebration, will be May 5th at 4:30. So the first date to keep in your calendar is March 12th, when nomination packets when the deadline is due.
Thank you. Ms. Hirsch, curriculum report.
Sorry, I can barely hear you. So hold on one second. The Curriculum Council met on January 7th. We learned about several new apps that have been added to our toolbox, including several that were added to support those with learning differences and special education needs. There was a discussion on the possibility of creating a rubric to assess and appraise current and new applications, and the need to get information out to the schools, letting them know when new apps are added and are available for their use. There was a brief discussion on having teacher training on this as well. The committee spent time discussing the creation of a screen time survey for teachers and the pros and cons of creating hard caps on screen time usage in class and school, and looking at ways to gather data on usage and to create a suite of power apps, those apps that are deemed to be the most impactful for learning. The committee also touched upon the courses study guide, briefly noted that there will be 2 new courses up for discussion: computer science honors program at our class, and yoga, and a possible social justice course to be added or discussed later. They also moved a deeper discussion on the vision of the graduate flowchart to a later date. Our next meeting, I believe, is not until March, and that is basically what occurred with Curriculum Council this past month.
Thank you. Ms. Kowalski, I think you had one more.
So I forgot, I have one other one because I filled in for my dear friend Joe Kelly over there with respect to the Julian Curtis feasibility study that's going forward. So we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we were met with 4 companies that we were looking to engage for purposes of undertaking a feasibility study, which would look at whether to add on to the currently existing school or build a new school. We have selected out of the 4, we selected 1 to move forward with. Tony, sorry, I don't have the name off the top of my head. Do you?
Perkins Eastman.
Thank you.
You want to ask? I'll do it.
Do I dare? Building a new school? Well, I'm sorry, that one flew right by me. It woke me up. I'm sorry. Which school are we talking about? Oh, thank you. Okay, fine. I don't need to ask more. I'm sorry. I was asleep over here, so I wasn't paying attention properly. Could I ask a different question? Are we done with committee reports, but it's on the subject of committee reports?
Yeah, go ahead.
As we assume our new assignments, I'm realizing I had a very animated conversation with my friend on curriculum, Karen Hirsch, and I had the same conversation with Karen Bianco as we were talking, Karen Kowalski as we were talking about other things. Some of these committees, I mean, obviously they're a standing committee, they have a pretty clear charter. Some of these ad hoc and liaisons, I'm not so sure I know what the charters are. So what's the best way to get clarification on what it is we're actually supposed to be doing? I mean, I don't want to just go into these committees, start bumping around and just start doing stuff, because that just drives the staff crazy. I'd rather it be narrow and useful to the board.
So you mentioned curriculum. That's actually set out in our policy. All of the standing committees are in our policy. Strategic plan is the only ad hoc committee at the moment. We obviously.
Isn't food services ad hoc?
Food services is also ad hoc, although that is a committee that is working for the superintendent, but they're advisory like all committees.
Okay. Are these charges somewhere?
So that was created by a previous superintendent. It's a conversation we've had. I think if the committees like that are created, they do need charges so that we know what they're doing.
That was really my question.
No,
I'm just wondering if they're somewhere and I just don't know where they are.
For that one, I don't know that they're. I've asked the question as well. Oh, it's on the web, on the district website.
The strategic one is not, but the food services on the web.
Well, the strategic one I think is easier, but we should have that one too. Yeah, okay. And by the way, if they're things we're just advisory to, but the committees themselves have a charge, that would be great to get that, Tony, from you, to say, hey, by the way, the committee you're sitting on or liaisoning to, their job is this, and it's written down what it is, just so it makes it, I don't know, I just feel like I could plug in better and be helpful rather than be disruptive if I were clear. Anyway, okay.
Thank you. And just a quick report of the chair. Tom Brady, if you're considering moving to Greenwich, we'd be happy to have your children in the Greenwich of Excellence. With that, we're also looking for sponsors for our stadium. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our discussion items. The first discussion item is the new course proposal and the course of study guide. Ms. Parisi.
I do have a group of colleagues with me, so would you prefer we huddle around the podium, or can we use the chairs up front?
If you're willing to pass the mic, although if you stand at the podium, everybody can see you. So let's embarrass you. Why don't you come on down?
All right, we'll go to the podium. Thank you. So good evening. In your board packet, you have one item, but there's three things there. Two new course proposals, one for yoga, mindfulness, and stress management, as well as the honors advanced computer science. It is important to note that these proposals provide an outline, the intended course participants, the rationale and need, and standards alignment, and how we plan to monitor and implement the course. We've engaged many teachers and students over the timeline of preparing these course proposals for you in the development, and collectively with my team here, we're proposing these as a complement to the Greenwich High School course of study guide, and certainly as options and opportunities for our learners. So with me this evening, we'll talk about the first one that's in the packet, which is Honors Advanced Topics in Computer Science. I do have Sheila Savala, STEM Coordinator, Dana Talata, Catherine Bolger, and I'm just making sure. And of course, our headmaster, Ralph Mayo, and assistant headmaster, Rick Piotrowski. And we can answer any questions that you may have with regard to that course. Would you like to take each item individually? Or?
That probably makes sense.
Okay. So we can answer any questions, or if you'd like to hear additional information that's presented in the course proposal.
So I'd just like to ask about, I guess, the advanced computer science class. And this is sort of a thread from a previous discussion. We know the progression in math. We know the progression in language arts. I don't know that I've ever seen a visual progression of the courses in our computer sciences. I know the program's evolved a little bit through the years. We've added here and there, but I don't know that we have a full progression. Is it in the complete course of study guide now?
So magically, on page 79 in the course of study guide, page 79. That might help you, but certainly we can speak further to the. It was there.
This one.
Yes, it's been there. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
That's good. Thank you. We could find it in scrolling through. 100-page documents are large. Discussion, you want to, Mr. Sher?
I guess I didn't, the thing I was so stuck on this thing with Irene, and unfortunately I come from this industry, so I'm going to be geeky about this. I guess I didn't understand whether, what we're looking to do beyond AP computer science, right? I mean, I guess I'm thinking, and I'm in the same place I've always been, which is I don't think our high school should be doing technical education, because I don't think we're the best organization equipped to that. And I realize that the teachers and the administrators at the high school, cringe every time I say that. And it's not about them, because I've learned that this thing, if the first thing the person tells you is I'm here for the kids, the next thing that's going to come out of their mouth is not about kids. And my take with this is I'm actually interested in the kids, and if the kids need a learning track, candidly, I want that learning track delivered the best way possible, whether that creates a job for a GHS teacher or not. I mean, that's not where I live. I live with where's the kid. So as an example, when you get past AP computer science, right? I mean, AP by definition is supposed to be college level work, right? So I'm wondering if there's students who need a progression beyond that while they're still in Greenwich Public Schools. So let's say they do AP Computer Science grade 11, and then I'm on to grade 12, and those kids really need more. Is the better answer making an arrangement with UConn Stanford? Is the better answer making an arrangement with AITE than us trying to do this ourselves, if our focus is to let that kid who really wants to do computer science thrive? Here's the other part I'm trying to figure out. That's part one. Part two is, which I think relates to that and helps answer that question, is the objective of this curricular track to get a student prepared who's going to go try to be a computer science major in a, let's call it a 4-year university? Or is it pre-work for someone to go actually try to get out of our school, go start getting a job directly? Or is it, I'm gonna have them go to one of the technical schools, Stevens Tech, one of those. I'm not clear what this track's objective is, and I always fear the serve all masters. There's a famous saying in technology, master of everything, master of none. So I'm trying to understand how what the view is, to Peter's point, on the curricular, what's the objective of it, what's the progression, and then when you fit that class in, what's that class serving as a part of that framework?
I will definitely let those that met with the teachers and the students speak to the course, but I think your second question, that we really are trying to prepare the students for any post-secondary experience that they choose. It's really all of the above, it certainly is, and where they're going in that pathway. But we did recognize that there is a need currently for these students versus just an independent study, and to provide them
for coursework instead of independent study.
And that this is beyond the AP course. But to speak to it, Catherine has been deeply involved in the development of this, very passionate, so.
Thank you. So let me just talk.
Hi, Catherine. I've never had the pleasure of meeting you.
I've been here with my Cyber Patriot team.
What's your last name?
Bolger.
Bolger.
B-O-L-G-E-R.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So just to, I thought that your first question was very interesting, and I will say that what I did, so I guess I'm the primary author of this course. What I do know is that I have looked into UConn's ECE program, and they don't offer like kind of a college credit if you complete like an AP course plus some other work. I know at the high school that we have some ECE options, and for whatever reason, computer science isn't one of them. So I looked just like at the very top just to see what is out there. And I have looked a bit at AITE. I've been to several Board of Ed meetings, and I understand that there is some discussion. I'm not really clear about the path with Greenwich students and AITE, but that would be something that we could at some point look at more in-depthly as well.
What do you think kids need?
Okay, so, well, let me talk about your second question. So I agree with what Ms. Parisi said, that we are trying to prepare students for many options. I would say that this course would be more oriented towards someone who is thinking about going like a 4-year college track, something like that. I mean, I just think a student leaving Greenwich High School, if they have followed our path, they will know some web design. They'll have done JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Those are the 3 languages that are primarily used in web design. They'll have completed an AP course in Java. And since we did the reboot, Python has overtaken JavaScript at other languages as one of the most popular languages. We already had, just since Christmas, parents emailing us, can you tell us what are the Python options at the school?
So for a high school student to lead with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Java, and Python, it's huge, I agree. Whether they will get a job, I mean, these students, if they're operating at this level and learning 3, 4, 5 languages in high school, clearly they are sharp students, motivated students, who could probably land some kind of a job. It's not going to be someone who does like a Cisco web certification. So Cisco certifications, that's a whole different ballgame. And those students, I would say, do find that career path is different. It's not like a 4-year career path. It's more of a certification kind of career path. That would have been another option to look at. And we kind of, when we were trying to think about what the course should be, that Cisco path wasn't the one that students were aiming towards. I think that probably at AITE, they would want to do something like a Cisco certification. So.
Thanks for the answer. That really sounds like a good, solid answer. I would tell my colleagues on the board who don't know about technology, that's a really good answer.
Ms. Downey?
So just in terms of the new this is more for Ms. Parisi, the new graduation requirements, because, so it's anticipated because these will now, because I know there were issues in the past about were computer science, were they electives or were they math? Now with the new graduation requirements, I guess with the freshman class, these would fulfill the STEM requirement.
They can, yes.
Like if you had a student who preferred this, I mean, I don't think it's likely you're going to have someone who's going to do this who's going to skip taking math. It would supplement
No, there's still
it.
the requirement for the years of mathematics that they have to have for the core mathematics, but yes, this provides them with that opportunity.
And it seems like, I mean, I'm kind of analogizing this with like the honors ad calc, that kind of once the AP track is over, you're providing, this is kind of an equivalent computer science class to the ad calc class that's taught in the math. Thank you.
Dana, yes, sign language.
Yes.
All right, other questions on the, yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. She's only been with me for like 4 meetings and she wants to kill me, stab me with pencils in the eyeball. This is a totally out of the box question, Irene, but since we're on computer science and we're on a progression, can I just ask it?
Sure.
Have you seen anybody in the state of Connecticut or another state who's looked at, this has got asked me, it was a crazy question, looked at learning coding languages in lieu of foreign language? Have you heard that before?
Yes, it's come up before, and there is a statewide conversation, but no, it has not been adopted yet, but there's a task force looking at that.
So we could never do that and meet state requirements?
No, not right now, no. There's no statute or public act yet that would allow us to
I'm
do
not
that.
sure whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, but it's an interesting out-of-the-box idea. Okay, thanks.
We are definitely talking, the CAPS organization under Fran Rabinowitz, we are talking about that as well. And again, there's a task force at the State Department with graduation requirements talking about it.
Great, thanks.
All right, so nothing else on that. We can move forward to the Yoga, Mindfulness, and Stress Management course, which I think we all need.
Right after this meeting. So with me this evening, yes. Oh. With me this evening, I do have Jeremy Boland, our PE Wellness Family Consumer Science Coordinator, as well as Francis Ortiz, Chris Hernandez, and Lil Perone, all advocating for this course. They have been embedding this into what we do on a daily basis throughout our whole program at the high school for 912. So it was time to then create this course and make it part of our course of study guide. And if you would like to see where it is on page 85. That's where the course is, but you can begin on page 82 if you would like to see the sequence of physical education. And certainly we can answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Downey.
I thought there used to be a yoga class at the high school. I feel like there had been, and it was eliminated. I mean, I'm just to clarify where we were, where we're going.
Lil Perone.
Hi, program associate at the high school. There is yoga instruction as a physical education, but the students don't have a choice in that. This will be an elective. It's really based on, it's under physical education, so depending on which instructor they have and which time of day. They could be in the fitness center or outside, or they could be in the dance studio. So they really don't have a choice, and that's what we're trying to create here.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Mr. Scher.
Peter, you're only allowed one.
No, forget it. What I didn't understand is how this fit into the progression, right? Can a student take this in lieu of taking? You know, it's like when you go through PE, right? When you're going out and buying, as we just did, new bathing suits, new goggles, you know, there's stuff that's required. They have to get a certain number of PE credits. How does this fit in? As opposed to it being, hey, I'm kind of interested in that. Because for me, this really aligned to when we did the board strategic plan, the one we have right now, right? The board was focused on two things: raising academic achievement, and said in more modern language, reducing anxiety, depression, making kids more mindful. That's that middle stripe. And this fits to that, you know, in today's vogue. So sounds like a good idea. The question is, how do you make it something that's available in the curriculum as opposed to it's elective oriented? That's what I'm trying to understand. How does it satisfy your PE requirement or wellness? Can you just take this instead of taking 4 years of wellness? So I don't want to have that discussion right now, but you know.
Yes, and there was a deep discussion.
So how does that work?
Sure, I'll let you. Okay.
It's basically be an elective for juniors or seniors. Instead of just taking PE, they can sign up for this particular course. Instead, yes.
But only seniors? Juniors and seniors?
Juniors and seniors
Still the
as
requirement?
of for next year. We're under discussions as this class of 2023 starts to proceed through the graduation requirements. So we may be speaking a new tune next year.
All right, any other discussion?
Did you guys have all the space for this? Or this going to be a giant yoga class in the gym? Because I know there's a problem with the studio.
We have a mirrored professional dance studio next to our fitness center upstairs. Well, there's never enough space, but
I was going to say, you make it sound so grand until you go visit it.
It looks bigger with the mirrors.
Perhaps I could use the new team rooms at Cardinal Stadium.
Yeah, at the stadium, fantastic. I love the stretching. All right, other comments on yoga, mindfulness, and stress management? Otherwise, we can move on to the course of study guide as an entirety.
So just as a process, these will come back February 20th for favorable approval.
Well, you're hoping for a favorable
I'm hoping for favorable approval, yes.
Yeah, we can talk about the course of study
Yes.
guide.
So I guess I'd like to thank our teacher colleagues that were here in helping us develop these courses, and I'll let them go home now. Thank you. Rick and Ralph have to stay. Ralph and Rick. So annually, we bring the course of study guide for the coming year to you so that we can ensure alignment to our current statutes, our policies and practices. We want to highlight where we've renewed any course descriptions and prerequisites to clarify course expectations and outcomes. We may update course titles to reflect the true content of the course. If there's a need to update any NCAA-approved courses where needed, and to really increase overall clarity and use for our parents and students as they plan their course schedule at the high school. So yes, Rick and Ralph are here with us to share with you any updates on the course of study guide. We did add a summary of the revisions in the beginning so that you can clearly see where those revisions have been made with page numbers, and we've also printed the version in color so you can see where the red indicates the changes in our course of study guide. We can answer any questions you may have.
So I guess I'll start. I see the 4 courses that you're recommending removal for. Obviously, if they haven't run in a while and there's no need for them in the progression, I totally get that. I guess what's left behind, though, is still over 200 courses. We're running a small college. knowing that we're bumping up against class sizes, knowing that we're not really getting additional staff at the high school, and knowing the additional graduation requirements that are in place now and the bump you're going to see in student enrollment, how are you balancing all of that in terms of, are there other things maybe we should be putting on hold while we offer more core courses? How are you looking at that? Because what you do for next year is going to affect you downstream.
Of course. I'll certainly have, this is a reality, this is the life of Rick, right? But certainly we are monitoring enrollment of all of the courses very closely to make those decisions of when, and there is a policy where if it's under 10, then the courses don't run, but the courses are there to still communicate that they could be available in the next run. But certainly, Rick, I don't know if you, or Ralph, as far as practices at the high school.
Obviously, it's a big puzzle here, and I wish I could project everything that's going to happen here in the next couple of years in terms of the courses. But we basically start with a course request, and then we take a look at the number of course requests we have for a given course, and then sometimes we try to run it, and sometimes if we don't get enough students loaded up into it, we can actually drop that and ask the kids to get a different course request. So we've been mindful after about every 2-3 years, every year, we take a look at what courses we have not run. And then if I back my mind the last couple of years, I'm saying, okay, maybe 1 or 2 years, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying these courses might pick up once the class of 2023 picks up with the graduation requirements. So these are always in the back of our mind saying, we're not ready to get rid of this particular course until we see how things play out with course request. Especially not so much next year, it'll be the year after, and year after that. So this will be something we're definitely gonna have to keep an eye on as we proceed through this class of 2023.
Other questions, discussion? Anybody on the phone?
I'm here. No, I don't have any other questions. Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. We will absorb again another lengthy document, but I do like to point it out to people because it really does show the breadth of the offerings for the students. So, nice to see.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Reyes out.
Was cardinal red a good highlight color for you?
Cardinal red. You got the right color. We need our own font too.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is the Hamilton Avenue School STEM Magnet Update. I know Dr. Carabillo is not with us this evening, so I will look to Dr. Jones.
Yes, I am delighted to invite Shanta Smith, our new principal this year at Hamilton Avenue, to come forward. And she is just going to give you an update on the STEM Magnet and what she has been seeing this really first semester. And there is a visual, just so if you hadn't noticed, on the right-hand side.
Thank you and good evening to the Superintendent Jones, to our board president, members of the Board of Education, Greenwich Public School staff, parents, and community members. I stand before you today as the proud principal of Hamilton Avenue Magnet School. Our school is bursting with dynamic elementary school scholars, devoted parents, and hardworking staff members. That's one of our events, our Hamilton Avenue STEM Fiesta. So slide 2 is information that provides you with just a window into my principal's entry plan. So the goal of this update is to provide you with information related to Hamilton Avenue School with a brief overview sharing our successes and our growth areas discovered to date. Prior to my first day of school on July 1st, I created a principal's entry plan to provide me with the opportunity to explore, engage, and elevate. The principal's entry plan is a year-long plan, which allows me to explore with the needs assessment, to establish goals and grows, to engage, to implement structures, to engage students, staff, and parents, and to elevate, to plan and implement systems related to the needs assessment, which is ongoing. Over the past 4.5 months, our entire staff has engaged in this needs assessment. Also, our stakeholders, including our students and our parents, have been involved in principals chat to inform this needs assessment. So for the exploring section, during my 6 months serving as a principal of Hamilton Avenue STEM School, I have embraced my role as the lead learner in the building and have nurtured learning amongst all stakeholders. To that end, I have mobilized our school's instructional staff to embark upon a school's self-study to recognize the rich history and culture of Hamilton Avenue school community, while also learning more about who we are as a learning community, what are our hopes and dreams, and what do we do well, and what are areas that we need to work on. Framing our work through the PLC learner cycle and keeping in mind the vision of the graduate, this has helped to guide our steps as we work to obtain a deeper understanding of our school's learning community and our students' personalized learning pathways. I am a leader who believes in leading from a stance of inquiry that allows us to assess our community using a strengths-based approach, which enriches our areas of growth. Assessing before making definitive actions, unless of course it is a matter of safety, is my approach. I understand that you must go slow to go fast so that we can plan for deep, enduring, and meaningful changes that will result in sustained improvements of our learning outcomes. Engage. Much of the work with our needs assessment was done through Hopes and Dreams conferences with many stakeholders. I had conversations with our students, one-on-ones with staff members, parents, community members, RTM District 3 members, members of central office and the executive board during the summer and the fall. In addition, I have been involved in an ongoing review of school-based data and archives. I understand the numbers. In the last 5 years, as measured by the Connecticut Smarter Balance Assessment. However, my goal is to understand the story behind the numbers. What is the root cause of the data? And how do I, as a school leader, work to move the school and learning forward? As a part of that work, I've been reimagining space and time. I've led our instructional staff in a school self-study to research elements of this data to forge a collaborative stake in the work that we accomplish together to improve learning outcomes. I understand that there is no I in team, and I cannot do it alone. Empowering teachers and strengthening strong and collaborative instructional teams provides collective agency to our organization and helps to support our future work together. We have reimagined space and time by reallocating and scheduling specific meetings to collaboratively analyze school climate and school data to brainstorm ways we can improve. As a school community of adult learners, we are focused on feedback and coaching to improve our practices. Subcommittees have examined ways to strengthen our implementation of Second Step, PBIS, promote better attendance as it relates to tardiness, and to highlight and celebrate the vision of the graduate. All of these elements are aligned to our school improvement plan. We've also been, as a staff, reviewing and analyzing current and historical standardized test scores, school climate survey data, and the Connecticut School Performance Index. Apologize for the delay. Also, as a part of that work in engaging the stakeholders, we have had principal chats. So I have engaged in conversations with the students, with the parents, with the staff on an ongoing basis. Our student council executive board members meet with me monthly, and we have 5th grade student leadership meetings. We also have incorporated parent visitation days, and those are a part of our opportunity to invite parents into our building on an ongoing basis. Most recently, we have community meetings, and our community meetings have been established to allow our students to showcase their talents, to share what learning is occurring in the building. We have those once a month. Some of our recent events were the STEM Fiesta, boosting the volume of reading for students with the Personal Readers Challenge and the Kindness Challenge. Community partners also, and this was with the help of Dr. Jones, who helped to create the opportunity for our students to work with the Young Artists Philharmonic Orchestra, and we have a number of scholarships from that new partnership. elevating through action. As I elevate through action, it is my goal to plan and implement systems and structures to address priority areas derived from our ongoing needs assessment. One priority is our magnet school theme. To elevate our theme and raise the bar in our current STEM efforts, it was important for me to value our rich culture of being the only elementary school in Greenwich with a Suzuki violin program for students in grades pre-K through 5, while innovating with the arts and math. With those efforts in mind, Hamilton Avenue STEM Magnet School will embark upon a journey of embracing the arts as a STEAM magnet school. From STEM to STEAM. As a part of those enhancements that will include marketing and showcasing the wonderful talent of our scholars who are a part of the Suzuki Violin program, innovating through the exploration of graphic arts, dance, and theater elements, the assessment of our magnet school partnerships using local, state, and magnet school and national guidance, which asserts that magnet schools are founded on one of many pillars, but 5 major pillars, which include diversity, innovative curriculum and professional development, academic excellence, high-quality instructional systems, and family and community partnerships. This synergistic relationship will help us to prepare for the future. Also examining student dosage of the magnet school theme, professional learning for the instructional staff, STEAM instructional approaches, a search for sustainable magnet and aligned partnerships, and regular and ongoing audits of student learning will be forthcoming. Enhancing these programmatic academic offerings with the planning of a student math academy is also one of our future endeavors, where we will work to address the Hamilton Avenue Scholars' needs of students who are performing at the novice and accelerated levels. Extracurricular enrichment for all learners. For the students, we're hosting a Jumpstart Literacy Math and Technology Camp, which will take place over February break. For the teachers, we're hosting a Summer Teaching Institute, which will be based upon the self-study and teacher-directed. Bridging the analysis and strategy implementation of our PLC Learners Framework. For the parents, we're hosting STEAM, literacy, and personalized learning workshops. All of these efforts, and as we're moving forward, were developed from collaboration and communication with our stakeholders. We have focus groups with our parents. Our parents are very interested in the arts. This is something that they wonder why it wasn't included in our previous endeavors. So, in wrapping up, I just want to say that Vivian Robinson wrote a book. It was called Student-Centered Leadership. And it was a culmination of a meta-analysis of different studies related to leadership domains that have a significant impact on achievement. And what she found was there were these key elements that were important for school leaders that were focusing from a student-centered leadership framework. The first one, goals and expectation. The second one, resourcing strategically. The third one, ensuring quality teaching. The fourth one, leading teacher professional learning. And the fifth one, ensuring an orderly and safe environment. It is with these aspects in mind that I move forward with our motto of We Are HAMAB Strong to lead Hamilton Avenue School. I look forward with great anticipation to future milestones of sustained success that we will achieve as a learning community over time. With continued support from our parents, central office staff, the Greenwich Board of Education, and the broader Greenwich community. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to update you on our progress as a school community to date.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? So, Ms. Stowe?
I was just going to say welcome, since I don't think we formally met. And I like the idea very much of going from STEM to STEAM. Thank you. Thanks.
So I'll just say, both of my sons attended HAMAB for some time, loved the school, and I love the direction we're going in.
Thank you.
Much needed, and let us know what we can do to help.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other discussion, thank you. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the DLE screen time update. And I guess we'll start with Ms. Parisi.
Again, good evening. In your board packet, you have the digital learning environment update on screen time. The report is presented in 4 parts. We did provide an executive summary to help orient the board and new board members and provide some background on the digital learning environment and the 4 educational goals. Section 1 describes the screen time in Greenwich Public Schools with expanded descriptions of passive use and active interactive use of our digital tools and resources. Section 2 describes how we as a district are monitoring screen time. You will notice screenshots of building administrator dashboards of some of our enterprise tools on specific tools that we're monitoring at the building level, classroom level, and student level. Also in Section 2, we provide an update on our progress in reviewing different platforms for monitoring usage and the expenditures of our digital tools, and we're currently in that discovery feasibility phase of this work. There are 2 appendices. Appendix A is to really empower parents as partners in monitoring screen time at home, and Appendix B provides a case study on one of the tools that we are exploring called ClassLink on how it can support school districts in monitoring usage and expenditures. And with me this evening, you know Michael Ting, our Chief Technology Officer, co-author and partner in this work, and we're certainly happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Stowe. Okay, Ms. Stowe, and we'll come back later, no?
Yeah. I don't quite know where to start, I have to say. Cricket doesn't ever use words like, she's always so lovely, and she used the word disappointed, and I have to say, that's how I felt when I read this. One of my colleagues, or rather I should say a friend, texted me and said it's a screen time report with no numbers. So I want to give you guidance because this is information only and we need to come back with some sort of action. But let's step back and think about what we, I guess, need to achieve. There are 2 things, right? There's the amount of screen time. Parents want to know that. I have to say, I'm with them 100% on that. We can't put that back on parents. That's not their job, it's our job. So we are, of course, capable of measuring that. So that's number 1. And then the effective use of screens. And obviously there's tons of literature out there on that, and that I'm not going to opine on that. But of course, we should maybe look at that as a matter of policy, because there are lots of limitations. And of course, it's really more in the elementary. I think everyone's probably going to agree in middle school, high school, it's much different. But there are guidelines. So perhaps we should be relying on some of that. Maybe that's what we should bring up at policy. So that's where I'm going to start.
Ms. Hurst, I know you're on the phone and I know you've expressed an interest in talking about this. Karen?
Sorry, it's very hard to hear. Hold on. Yeah, I actually have quite a few questions. I know this was a topic that we discussed, this report specifically at the Curriculum Council. So I can tell you, I note that the report says the tools that are used to measure student progress, and it kind of gets to the central question of what we've been asking the district to do since the introduction of the DLE and the personalized learning program. These tools and programs, we want to know if the tools and programs are advancing and enhancing our students' education. Are they meeting our learning goals? And where is the data that shows that student education has been improved by using the devices? The report sort of notes that at the elementary level, it's difficult to deliver app usage information, and this concerns me as you provide information for parents to monitor screen time at home, yet also note that the iPads don't have that functionality. So I'm really confused. Which is it? Either they have the functionality to monitor screen time or they don't. And it still doesn't really give us the usage as to what's going on in the tools, especially for those in kindergarten to 2nd grade who don't bring the devices home. So that's sort of a secondary piece to that. And personally, I have a serious issue with delegating the monitoring responsibility to parents. As I noted during the Curriculum Council meeting, most of the parents who have concerns already set limits and monitor usage at home. They're concerned about what they cannot see, control, monitor, or access. What's happening in their, during the school day, and the data from the tools that are embedded in some of the apps is outlined in the report. So that's just a concern that I have. We've set standards, minimum requirements for usage, yet we don't seem to have a way to monitor or ensure how those requirements are being met. So I'm curious as to know why there isn't a way to monitor it.
And it seems we probably should be looking into, as Kathleen said, some sort of policy to define acceptable use of in-class screen time. So is there a reason that we don't have a way to sort of monitor the standards and the minimum requirements for usage that we have noted in the report?
Those are ones that we can monitor because we are paying, those are contracted digital tools. So the ones that are listed in that chart, we do monitor, and those are the screenshots that have been provided for you. So STMath, and again, the example in the report, STMath, Dreambox, and Lexia, we pay for licenses to use those, and because of that, you get the analytics and the dashboard. So we do monitor the usage of those. We provide the expectations of use, 60 minutes a week. And then the administrators at the building level have an admin console. I have a district console. I'm in there regularly, as is the program coordinator for those particular tools. There are tools, if you don't have like an enterprise.
Okay, well, I have I definitely think this is something that we should take up at maybe at PGCs to looking at the sort of policies as to how to do this. But again, I know you discussed passive use versus active use. But either way, whether our students are actively or passively using the devices, they're still being subjected to things like blue light and other health issues. I know that's a major concern for many parents because we don't, there are some studies out there to discuss some of the health issues. Students are having recent reports that raise concern about vision issues, overstimulating still developing brains, creating tech addiction, and many other things. So what is it that we as a district are looking to do to sort of combat the possibility of negative health issues from these devices?
I think that has to be a partnership with the Board of Education, as you've highlighted already. That is something I would not want to do independent of everyone in the district. So I appreciate that and look forward to that. And that was never a discussion at the original onset of the development and implementation of the digital learning environment. We've learned a lot through each year of implementation. So I appreciate it's true. But here we are and raising this good discussion, and I welcome that.
Yeah, I have one last question.
I can't hear from Ms. Parisi's answer. Can you speak up?
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Can you just speak up a bit, Ms. Parisi?
Can you hear me now?
Get an answer. Yes, we just didn't get an answer to the last question. Like you said something I didn't hear a specific answer.
Essentially, I stated that I welcome the conversation as we look at these concerns that are being raised now, and I think it's in partnership with the Board of Education, the PTAC representatives, and all of the Greenwich administrators.
I guess I want to go back.
And I have one.
Go ahead, Karen.
I have one last follow-up question. You note the use of ClassLink. I was just curious to see exactly when we started to work with them, because we've been asking for this type of information for over a year. So I'd like to really know how long this will take to get up and running and actually have useful data, even if it's baseline to move forward. It needs to be done with expediency, and we really need to be creating regular updates so that we have a better understanding of how the devices are, the screen time is being used in class. I mean, we want to make sure it's supporting learners and meeting the goals that have been set for their usage. So, if that's what ClassLink is going to be able to do for us in conjunction with the monitoring that's built into some of the apps, when can we start to see some actual, data that will be helpful?
We met ClassLink through actually it's a statewide initiative with Fran Rabinowitz and CAPS. They are a business partner with that statewide group. And that's how we met them, and we're in the exploration phase, really, of trying to determine whether or not ClassLink can give us what we need. They provide some services and resources. It's not going to be the one that's going to do everything for us. Primarily at the 6-12 level, as we indicated, there's a significant partnership that could be had there to do exactly what you're saying. With the iPads, though, because it's app-driven, that may not be the right way to go. But again, we're still exploring the different platforms that can do this for us. And certainly, we did start having conversations with them in June and throughout, and it's still at present and ongoing, and Michael has been at the table, along with others at Havemeyer, talking about this.
Okay, this has been, in the works, and questions have been asked for quite some time. so I just want to voice that I'm concerned that we're just sort of finding companies to do this that are not able to really do what we're looking to do. So, I don't know what else is out there, but, it's a concern.
We understand, which is why we actively met with them, have had different webinars with them, but there are limitations to the platform for what we're trying to do and the devices that we have in our district. And Michael is here, certainly you can speak to that because...
So I think part of the problem here is when you're talking about measuring screen time, you're talking about two different platforms. You're talking about iPads and you're talking about Chromebooks. I do want to mention that on the iPad platform, it's not currently possible to pull centralized metrics for app usage. And what I brought with me here is an email from a systems engineer at Apple that we've been working with for years. Apologies if this gets a little bit technical, but it says, the main hurdle here is the MDM framework does not deliver app usage information. Therefore, and this is from Apple, therefore, there is no systemic way to gather app usage information on a per iPad basis. Now, part of this report, in the appendix, there are step-by-step instructions for parents to implement screen time on a per iPad basis. But there's currently no way for us as a school district to compile all of the separate information.
Peter.
I realize you're new, or you were in a different job before. Irene, you've been on this thing since the giddy up, okay? And I'm just gonna say this outright. I remember the arm wrestling between your department and the CIO who was here before department. And candidly, sitting there as a board member, it was petty, stupid, and got in the way, okay? And the reason is that we are not thinking about this properly. And I've raised this repeatedly in board meetings, and it is frustrating to me that we get to a simple question like this and we can't answer the basic question. I've made a small personal fortune, fortunately, so my kids can go to college and I can live in Greenwich, Connecticut, by providing technology to organizations. And I've said this before. I have plenty of clients I've sold technology to, and you know what they used it for? To do exactly what they were doing yesterday. It made no difference to whatever it is they're doing. And then I've provided technology to many, many organizations who used it to transform what they were doing and achieve their goals. And what I said all along when Bill McCursey was here, and he kept calling this thing digital learning environment, I kept underlining, that is wrong. We are trying to transform the way we educate kids, and oh, by the way, this technology is the enabler. When you start with the technology and you pick things in pieces in isolation, and you don't think about how it's going to integrate together and what you're trying to accomplish, which in this case is to teach kids an integrated curriculum that is horizontally and vertically integrated, and you don't select tools that support that, it's not your criteria. If you're just going away, which has happened here, we just went away and let teachers pick tools, and we let groups of, hold on, let me finish. We let curriculum groups, and we let teacher academies in the summer, and we let people pick these tools. The problem with it is you're gonna wind up with this thing where you got the greatest little widgety new great thing, but when the board or the administration wants to take a holistic view, you can't do it. Let me just translate what you said, okay? Just so everybody knows what you said. Apple didn't design their product to be used in an enterprise type environment. That's what that engineer is saying. They said, we designed our product so that each one of you could kind of use it at home, where there's no requirement to look at an aggregation of data. So we picked a tool, and I don't want to beat up on iPads, whether they were not, but this is an example of, this is where this comes home to roost. We picked a tool we put it in the hands of students, and we didn't think about what it was we were going to need to run the school system and get the visibility we needed, which is what this conversation is really about, is how are these tools used and how are they affecting student outcomes? And we don't have the data to answer that question. We've also compounded the error by picking individual tools, to your point. Part of it has centralized management tools built into it, and it has a console and data, and we can do analytics. And part of the tools we're using are not. The question is, how do we get to a place in curriculum where people are using tools that don't meet these basic requirements? Because then we can get around to this, which is we can't answer the basic question. I think the question about screen time and screen time standards is the wrong question. The right question is, how is it, as an example, pick a subject, math, English, we want to teach it, and how do these tools fit into that? How does it enhance it? How does it degrade from what we're really trying to do? But we're off on this silly conversation about somebody set standards on what we're using, and then you guys have to stand up here and tell us, by the way, we can't actually give you data because we don't really have data. Or in some of our portfolio we have data, the other part of our portfolio we don't have data. The only thing I'm thinking on this is, I don't know that this is even the right question about time. I would hope we'd pull ourselves back from this. And we need to look at what our teaching, because the real question is, that Ms. Stowe raised, and other board members raised, is have we turned these things into babysitting assistants in classrooms? That's the real question. And is there places where that's happening? Now the answer is, it's probably not happening throughout the whole district, but there may be places it's happening. But you guys don't have the data to know what's happening. And we got to get to a place, it's a very long-winded way of saying, we got to reset this thing. And I think our focus has to really be around how we're teaching in the classroom, how we're using these tools to supplement the teacher, and where, if we've got problems where there are teachers who are not following good practice, Kinley, I don't want to know. You know who I want to know? I want you to know, I want Ann Carabillo to know, and I want Tony Jones to know, so that you can go have a conversation with a principal that I don't know about and I don't want to be involved in. I think we're just off on the wrong subject, and we've landed here because we've spent, I don't know, how long have we had DLE now? 7 years? How much have we spent? 17, 18, $20 million? It's not that great things haven't happened by DLE. Great things have happened in this district through DLE. But you bring up learning, this is a part where we have to have a moment of truth and kind of reset what we do from here forward. I don't want to spend too much time on the past. We got to reset where we're going from here, and we got to stop. We got to learn all the lessons that came out of this episode. And I'm glad you two are paired. Wonderful. But we got to change our practices so this kind of stuff doesn't happen in the future.
May I respond?
Yeah.
I agree with you, and we have changed some of those practices. The digital tool, it was the Wild Wild West, which you had known, and you had coined that way back when we first started to have a systemic way of creating a digital learning environment one-to-one. And we put the digital tools through a rigorous process. We tell teachers no. Teachers request over 150 different applications every single year. We do have a rubric, but we're revising it to reevaluate the accessibility features of the tools because they provide new things. Our rubric was outdated. So that's been the recent conversation. But we tell teachers no. We've also reevaluated with Bob Hipson coming on board the digital toolbox because it was too wide, too varied. I mean, you look at the original list, I think there were over 200 applications. We've eliminated the ones that just don't have an impact on achievement or an impact on practice, and they are no longer available. Will teachers go and find something or go to a conference and hear about a new tool and want to try? Absolutely. And we have already set out collectively that in the spirit of innovation, let's try and let's change our practice. So we have revised the process. It is visible. It's on the website. We only have 2 windows during the school year that teachers can recommend applications. So we've tried to tighten it up. And even some will argue that that's not enough. Why isn't it open again? Because we want to manage it and put the right tools in place for the students and the teachers. as well as, again, give them what they need when they're asking for it. So we have made some revisions in reflecting on this process since we started in 2013. And I can share the differences in the rubrics with you if you'd want to see those.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say after all that, except for the fact that I think that you're right. The first priority is it effective? We need to justify that. That's the first thing. But if we can't measure the second item, then being screen time, then it's on us to sadly be more prescriptive about it. And that'll be our only option. And then we'll have to basically say, as a matter of policy, kindergarten through second graders, sorry, you're not gonna be able to have it for more than an hour a day, or whatever it is. Because until we can prove it's actually being more helpful, then I think it's on us to do something about it.
Ms. Olson, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, I guess a lot of it's already been said. There are a lot of great points brought up tonight. Some really poignant questions that weren't, very few were directly answered. I do think, as Mr. Sherry said, we need to reevaluate in a lot of ways, you know, how we're looking at this, how we're using it as an educational tool. I pretty much have every single question that Ms. Bursch had asked, and will await practical, concrete responses at some point. And I also just found this to be overall a disappointing report, more of a how-to, a what is screen time and how-to, rather than I think what the board was actually asking to see. So nothing really to respond to other than just that I echo the sentiments of others on this one.
So, Ms. Downey and Michael, I think we've lost Ms. Hirsch. I don't know if you can reach out to her.
I agree with Peter and Kathleen about the efficacy being number one, but I think we need to think about, like to Kathleen's point about policy, a strategy, if, particularly in the lower grades, the K through 2, I would argue, is there a way to find the data or, you know, anecdotal, you got to start somewhere just because it's not automated.
It would have to be self-reported, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to do something because we can't do nothing. So I think middle school and high school are a little bit of a different, it's kind of ironic because we can have the data on the middle school and the high school, and I think people are less troubled about the middle school and the high school. So it's unfortunate, but I think we really, regardless of the approach that Peter and Kathleen are mentioning about the efficacy, I do think there needs to be some thought given to how to capture the data. Because I think, to the point, we don't necessarily want to be making policies about how many hours a day. And the other point is that you talk about passive use. I'm not sure there really is should be passive use of these in the schools at all. I mean, that's kind of, I hate to say it.
Just
that's
trying
like
to provide the difference between the two.
Totally agree, yeah. So, but we also need to make sure that they're not being used as the babysitters or in the passive way.
Just in what you're saying, and we've talked about that at Curriculum Council, it would have to be self-reported. That is an additional task on teachers and takes time. And again, we're talking about it to see, and the teachers are represented on the council, and they have something to say about it. So, again, yes, self-reported.
So I guess I want to go back to where I started on digital learning, which is before I was on the board, the question I kept asking, and I guess I'll just keep asking is, how are we measuring success? So I think a lot of it goes to what Peter and Kathleen were saying about efficacy, how they're used. I mean, this sheds a little bit more light on how they're used. I'm glad to hear we do have some parameters about the use, but without that data, we're never going to know. And without the true measure of success, it's never been defined. I mean, I've been on the board 6 years. This happened, I think, about 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, I asked the question at a public meeting, and I've asked it several times while I've been on the board. I don't think I've ever gotten an answer. And I think it's time we had one.
We did provide an analysis of some of the digital tools against the assessments that we had internally, and that was presented. If we're talking about measuring the whole of the digital learning environment, then we need some guidance on that and working with Dr. Jones on what that might look like.
Mr. Chair.
I just want to clarify, you know, I know you guys are probably feeling beat up right now, but that's okay. You know, surprisingly, someone said, board meetings are not board meetings to the public. They're board meetings, they're meetings of the board with the administration in the public. So unfortunately, this is how we have to do it. But, you know, it's all well-intended, I think. it's got to get to a place, Irene, and I think, you two need to work together on this. I think there's two things, right? One's kind of an operational metric, and then one's kind of it's strategic information. And what I mean by that is, like screen time, how much people are spending in one application on screen time. By the way, I can get that on my phone. I'm always amazed that Apple products, as good as they are, don't monitor that, don't allow you to roll that data up, because they let you monitor on the device. That's like an operational metric. I think you guys got to focus on, which I know these tools have, and I know they aggregate the data, which is, to using your parlance, right? Which strand is the kid working in? What are they doing? How are their scores improving over time in the tool that they're using? That's the strategic data. I'm way more interested in that, and being able to look at that. You should be able to run from the top of the organization all the way down. Don't buy tools that don't let you do that. If you can't buy a tool that says, tell me how I'm doing at a district level, tell me how I'm doing at a grade level, break it down into building, classroom, down to the individual student, and it doesn't readily provide you that, okay? Because we can't be the aggregator and creator of that data. We just don't have the capacity to do that. So if you're gonna pick a major tool, Irene, that's a part of the, because these digital tools are part of the curriculum, they're curriculum materials. It's really what they are.
Supplement, yes.
Okay. If you can't, that has to be, you got to buy that. Because if it doesn't have that, you kind of have to throw the tool away, because we'll never be able to figure out whether the investment is worth it. And you got to make that kind of a requirement. Now, to your point, kind of spot tools, like, I don't know, reading intervention in this particular thing in grade 3 only, probably not reasonable to think about a big dashboard and rolling up all the data for that. If you can get it, great. But if there's something you're using integrated, like Power Applications, thank you. That's a great way to term it. ST Math, and you're using fully integrated K through 5, then obviously you need all the management data associated with that, and you can't use tools that don't do that.
Exactly.
The one last point, I agree. I don't think I really care what's going on with Chromebooks in 9 through 12. I just don't think that data is helpful or meaningful. I'm curious how meaningful it is at middle school, K-5. You just got to knock the cover off that ball and be able to just know that answer, because that's where the rubber really meets the road. So
I think page 5 and 6 do help get at that's exactly what we're looking for.
Yes.
Where it's the average number of lessons per week, the number that students are completing, and the amount of growth they're making in those particular standards. Because there is a correlation that if they have 60 minutes per week and they complete 5 lessons within a week on average, that has so many months of growth in mathematics or an ELA, and those are the tools. We do have
I have to believe they're building this in their product. I mean,
that was a selling point,
Right.
and that was one of the things we were looking for. And there's other value adds, of course, when we're purchasing those tools, but we get this when we purchase. Not all of the applications we have in our toolbox are enterprise and contracted, some are free.
These things also, just correct me if I'm wrong, they also tell you how long that kid was in that application, doesn't it?
Yes, it's just not in this particular screenshot I provided for you.
Right, but they do
yes,
tell you
exactly.
that, right?
Yes, I look at that, and if I do see 0 usage, I'm talking with the principals, and Ann and I do meet with the principals to talk about their dashboards, or if we see it's too much, not enough, again, because we know that X number of minutes within a week has an impact on their achievement as measured by our
Because
STAR
here's my
assessments.
simple question, right? And I'll leave it at this. I would want to know, to the screen time conversation, just, maybe without naming names, so this is not a shame game, right? Can you tell me which grades and schools are overusing these apps? I think that was really the board's question. Can you just tell me, is there some place that we're overusing this? Is it spot or is it systemic? That was really the question about screen time. And I think you actually have the data. You guys just need to work on how you roll it up and normalize it and aggregate it, because you're pulling it out of 5 different apps. But that's okay. Somebody can do that.
We do have the
By the way,
conversations
go partner with the people at the high school in the computer science department, I bet, or statistics. There are kids doing statistics projects and AP statistics. They would love to do this project. What an idea.
Dr. Jones, myself, and Dr. Carabella, we do work with the principals on this, again, presenting that information school by school, here publicly. I mean, that's a decision to be made, so.
Then put us in executive session. I mean, it's in the realm of the possible.
Mr. Kelly.
Sorry, I still have her.
Seems we're trying to invent protocol and procedure. What are the other towns doing regarding these topics?
Well, again, that's why statewide, with Fran Rabinowitz, who's the executive director of CAPS, has partnered with ClassLink to help us. We're all asking the same question, at the same time trying to balance innovation, because the state is really moving towards that and mastery-based learning. So it really is a balance. You don't want to handcuff the teacher and say that you only have X number of minutes in a block of time to use a particular tool. And as teachers have shared with us, and this is the same conversation in Fairfield County and beyond, that one day I may use the device and the next 3 days I may not use it, because it's the curriculum is driving the intentional and purposeful use of those tools. I agree with Mr. Scher. We started the wrong way. We went the device first instead of saying what's driving it from the standards in the curriculum. And so we've learned over time, and teachers also learn too, we're asking better questions on how best to integrate it. But again, we have to continue to research that, or really talk about it from the inside out, of what would be the right guidelines or parameters for me as a teacher in Greenwich Public Schools to make the best decision in the classroom. It's going to be very mixed from our teachers.
All right. It seems like there's still some runway for you all to do some heavy thinking and maybe come back to us at a certain point in time.
Sure.
So we can talk about when that might be when we get to agenda planning. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, strategic plan update. I guess, Mr. Scher, I think this is your moment in the sun. You want Dr. Jones, or?
You want me to speak? I'll do this every order you want.
I
thought would be here to support Dr. Jones since her name was on.
Well, Tony, okay.
Do you want a strategic plan update?
Well, I do want to hear what the committee is doing, if you've met, if you have a schedule, but I guess we'll start with Dr. Jones and then we'll move to you.
I actually, last weekend, sent just some draft information out to the committee. We have not met yet, and part of that is also one of our members was away this week, so we were going to try to meet. So it's really looking at, if you remember, the planning kind of grid we had earlier in the year, and are we keeping pieces of that or going in a different direction because we've got new people. So I think we've got the conversation starter to be ready for a meeting. It's just we've got to get the date set. It's kind of like finance right now. It's so busy. It's really difficult getting everybody together.
And I guess, Mr. Scher, before you start, I'll note what we did for the agenda plan, as you'll see when we get there. We've added in every board PD or retreat session, just so that you've got dedicated time.
So let me tell you what we've done in the meantime. Some board members have spent, thank you very much, by the way, extensive periods of time with me on the subject of the strategic plan. I have a couple board members. I need to have those one-on-one sessions. Peter, you're one of them. Joe, you're one of them. And Kathleen, Megan, we have to do. So let me just give you a highlight. One of the things we did is I've gone to each board member before we sit down as a committee to get the answers to kind of two questions. One is, what's your view on the current strategy, if you have one? If you don't have one, that's okay. And the other one is, what do you think are some of the most important issues that we would need to kind of address? And those have been kind of free-ranging discussions. They're very helpful to have. We got a lot of horsepower on this board. We're fortunate to have just 8 really smart people, which makes it easier to do things strategy. In a lot of cases, people have been asking about strategy process. What are the different ways you could approach strategy? As you can imagine, I can wax poetic on that, and I have done, and people have been patient listening to that. But we've talked about kind of some approaches, and there seems to be a consensus building around a particular approach. I'll give you that now, but I feel like it's a little preempting because all the board members, I haven't got the input from all of the board members, which is an overdue task for me to do. I think we've kind of settled on, people have a they have a pretty good understanding of what the current strategy is. They don't understand everything necessarily on how we arrived at what that strategy was, particularly the board members who were not involved in the actual building of that. There's lots of points of views about what has been successful and maybe what needs a little bit of focus in the future. In terms of a process, couple touchstones. I've proposed to everybody, and I think so far everybody's agreed. For me, there's two models of building strategy. One is a small committee does it and comes back and talks to the rest of the group. The other one is it's a whole body experience. I'm a big fan of the whole body experience. I'm not a fan of the small group doing the work. I think this is so important and so central to what an organization does that all the key stakeholders have to be at the table and everybody has to hear all the same conversations and all the same conversations have to be had. It gets a little logistically a little bit more complicated, but to your point, Mr. Bernstein, with the fact that there's spots in the calendar, it's going to facilitate that, which is good news. What I'm proposing is that we would try to get to a place, working with PGC as an example, there's a series of intersects that have to happen, where we could talk about our, in one meeting or in one kind of set of session, we could really talk about what's our vision and what's our big strategic goal for Greenwich Public Schools. Just as a reminder, last time that was, we wanted to improve student achievement and we wanted to improve the health and wellness of children. So those were the two big ones at the beginning. Unfortunately, we had a framework for that, as everybody will call, vision, graduate, mission, vision, all the rest of it. We probably need to revisit that and see if that's still in the same place where everybody is. And then we need to translate that into, if that's the goal, we need to be able to articulate that in kind of a way that we can describe it. As an example, student achievement, we need to be able to render that in what does improved student achievement mean, whatever that winds up meaning. The proposal is to do that one step. The next step would be, we would talk about how we would achieve that. If you're following along in the current strategy, we said the way that we were going to do that was by investing in personalized learning. That is kind of, so to think of the first one as the goal, the second one is kind of the how. There could be lots of hows. Right now there's just one kind of big one in our current strategy, but that doesn't mean you only need to have one. You could have multiples. It's really, how are you going to get to that goal over what the period of time is? And then the last part is to really flesh that out into big things that need to happen in order to execute that strategy over a period of time. I'm proposing that between now and the end of May, early June, that the board would move through that process and be able to answer those three questions and have those down on paper. At that point, we could draw a line for right now. And this is the part of the strategy process where the board is leading. And it's not a handoff. It's one part the board leads, the other part the administration needs to lead. And then we would say, if that's the framework that we all agree on, board and administration together, from there, then June forward, we could hand that to Tony, and Tony could flesh that out into an execution plan. What does the organization need to do? When do they need to do it? It's probably best to flesh that out in half years, because you can't be more precise than that. Flesh that out in half years, and then that would come back to us maybe September or October in terms of an execution plan. I think that's more realistic than trying to get all of that done. The feedback I got from most board members is they were a little concerned it might have been a little ambitious to get both the board's work done and the administration's work done by the end of June. So based on that feedback, I'm essentially suggesting we relax that a little bit. What we are going to do is the strategy committee was going to try to meet this next week, and we're still going to try to do that. We were going to shoot for Monday on Martin Luther King Day, but calendars didn't permit. Our objective is to get that, flesh this out into, I have to do two things. Finish off talking to the other board members, particularly Joe, you, Peter, and Megan. And then we would bring that together into the committee, map this out, put this down on paper. Mr. Bernstein, we would then come out of that with a proposed calendar and rough agenda about what would happen in each meeting. And then see if we can get it all to fit and we can get to the potential, the goal of having the updated vision of a strategy done by June. One additional caveat. I think there's general agreement so far that it's critical to go out and survey the community and other stakeholders again. I'm hoping in this meeting we'll be able to talk about that, about how to actually do that. As you know, there have been, Peter knows this, there have been a number of times we've tried to survey before. The one that I thought worked actually the best was not the strategy one. There was one done around banish the word, banish the thought, but think about the outcome. It was done by Medicine Associates around, a racial balance, thank you. State's demand for racial balance. But the insights that were provided were exceptionally deep. They gave us very, very good insights into moving beyond what everybody thinks they know anecdotally about what the community wants and what people, the stakeholders actually wanted. So one of the big challenges is how would we be able to execute something like that, and how would we get the data so that it would inform the board at the right time? That's a topic I think we're going to take up in the committee. Just one underline, unless you all tell us otherwise. We think the committee's role is merely to provide structure and organization. The committee's job is not to have discussions about strategy content. I think that needs to only be done with the full board, or at least that's what we're proposing. So we're essentially an organization and steering committee to facilitate the process, not a committee to do strategy work itself, unless any of you agree, have a view otherwise.
So I guess, Peter, one question, one comment. You're envisioning another 5-year plan. Is that the idea?
Me personally, I would do 5. I would leave that to the group. I think the challenge you have in an organization like this is our measurements. You want to see if your strategy is actually happening, and in education, 3 is probably too short to monitor it. It's not like we're running a business where we get, quarterly financial reports and we can watch our stock price. It doesn't quite work like that. So I would propose a little longer time frame, but it doesn't. The one thing that I think we didn't do well with the current strategy is it became like tablets that were chiseled, and it didn't become something that is useful in helping us facilitate our work and letting it be living, breathing, and flexible. And it helps be a better tool to the superintendent. We need to agree that once we get this done, that we find a way to more incorporate this into our work. And if there's something that we get that's data, we have to be willing to change and adapt. I'm not so sure with the last plan we did that well. Room for improvement.
I guess I'll repeat what I've said before, all the way back to when we voted on it to the last time we discussed it, which is not having the action plan underneath it, I think, is what made it very difficult. So I think what you're saying is right. If we set the high level and the superintendent comes in behind with an action plan, it's not something that's set in stone, and it basically is something that can be adjusted over time. So I'm with you. Just the one comment, our target for voting on this is June 18th. So as you're working, because that is our last business meeting of the year.
I think it's achievable.
Okay.
It's achievable, but it means there has to be, to your point, Peter, I think we can get, just in terms of when you talk about strategy, I have to look at the meetings, but I think if we're disciplined about this, and people do their homework not in the meeting, but before the meeting, I'm optimistic we could power through this in 3 focused sessions. Now, what we have to do is not take those sessions and load them up with a bunch of other stuff. They have to be focused on that topic, and then we could get it done in 3. Otherwise, we're going to have to spread it out to more, and we don't have the time for more.
So I guess my response is take a look at the agenda plan, because we've put it on there for you. But as you and the committee meet to help set that structure, you'll be able to help say this is what we need to hold. So I'm good with that.
Tony and the others, is there anything I missed or didn't represent properly? No? Kathleen, anything I missed? No. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We look forward to continuing to work on that. And it's a good lead-in, actually, to the next topic of discussion. which was our board goals. So we set these in April. They were sort of high-level, living, breathing goals. They're goals already in our policy, basically the requirements of board members that come from state law. This was more granular in terms of what are we going to work on this year. So not meant for really lengthy discussion other than this was a way to refresh you. All of these are out there. The first point actually is solely about our strategic plan coming up. So I think, Peter, you've addressed that. The second was just about the effectiveness of the board and how we use our time. One is the time management for board agendas. We've tried not to load them up. We've tried to focus on core activities. We space things out a little bit better. I think we've managed that. Our meetings don't run till midnight or 1 in the morning. We're not planning to do that tonight, although if there's a request, we can entertain it. But the idea is to use our committees a little bit more. I'd rather not entertain it. We've continued to try to do this, and we've set aside those sessions for professional development and otherwise. I'd like to keep that calendar as we start thinking about the rest of this year, and policy governance, we'll start thinking about a calendar for next year before we know it. So just, if you have thoughts on that. The next is just development of a communications plan. Is Karen back on the phone? No. Good. So I think this is something our board secretary should take up. It's an area of interest and passion for her. This was put in here at the time before our previous communications director departed, but I think it's something we really do need to work on, especially the budget season. For the new members, this is really critical. We go to each RTM committee and district meeting, and every board member basically pitches in. Not every board member engages before that with BET or otherwise. It might be helpful to have that. So we need to think also about how we communicate to the community as a board, not the district, but the things we're working on and what we do. So anyway, if you're all in agreement that Karen ought to work on it, we'll let her know when she gets back from her sunny vacation.
Wait, let's just be clear, that's Karen Hirsch and not Karen Kowalski.
Yes, absolutely. And then the last bit was about working collaboratively with the superintendent. Obviously, she's been here a whole 6 months now. She hasn't run screaming for the hills. She talked about a 10-year contract. I don't know if anybody caught that. But I hope that's going well. I obviously encourage all board members to reach out to the superintendent. I think she's done a very good job communicating with us, and we just need to keep those lines of communication open. So I'll pause there if anybody has any questions about these, but they were never meant to be, this is the be-all, end-all. It really was just to help us kind of focus the work. We'll take the discussion of these up again in the spring. Whether we want to continue doing something like this. We really hadn't done it before, but I thought it was a helpful exercise and went over many, many months. Anyway, they're there. Read them if you have questions. Obviously, happy to answer them. All right. With that, we will move on to our first action item of the evening, which is Cardinal Stadium. Because it's an action item, I'm actually going to make the first motion just to put it on the table, and then we can have discussion. Mr. Sharp.
Just in terms of process, is there a way we could discuss all the motions at once and then, because they're all connected?
So we make the first one to put it on the table, and then we can discuss
Because I was gonna,
staging of it.
I'm gonna make a motion to modify, but the modifications go together.
So
But let's just discuss it.
You're thinking about putting them all together? There's a very specific reason why they're separate. I'm happy to explain it before we go through the motions, if that's what you're looking for.
You're looking to amend each motion.
I'm looking to have the discussion about how to get the project done, and then the motions follow. The motions to me are the mechanics.
Yeah, it's an action item, though, in the practice is you actually have to have a motion on the table to have the
Yeah,
discussion.
so if you want to put one on the table, and then we can-
that's what we'll do. We'll take one at a time anyway. So, I move to replace the design of Cardinal Field project. Option B is voted on at the February 22nd, 2018 board business meeting with the design presented at the January 7th, 2019 board special meeting, including the separate building on the visitor side, a new driveway and bridge to connect the high school parking lot, and the phasing of the project as recommended by the architect. Is there a second? Second from Ms. Downey. All right, discussion. I'll just say that the reason I've done this is 3 motions, and these were the recommendations of the administration. Basically done as 3 motions. One is we had an option that we voted on previously. We need to take that off the table. and basically put this in place with the direction that we want to go in. The second motion is more related to the town charter. Basically, we have to direct the superintendent to pursue municipal improvement, and we want to do that in a certain manner. We want to do it so that the projects are done in the phases, so that the first phase can go independently of the second phase. And the third is just to amend our capital request. As we understand it, the first selectman's already doing that on his own behalf, which he has the ability to do, but that it's smart for our board to. Yes, exactly. Anyway, that's the thinking of having the three separate motions, but discussion, Mr. Scher.
Mine's just quick. I'll have more comments after this, but just in the first wording on the amendment of the motion, amend the motion, basically the committee specifically left the visitor side building to be decided whether it's a standalone separate building or building under the bleachers. So that has been, the committee has put that forward as something that they would like in the motion.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. I think that the committee said that there could be further discussion about that, right? But I don't think the committee was proposed one design over another, is that?
That is 100% correct, but leave it vague. I think you can do that by just dropping the word separate, including the building on the visitor side.
I mean, you can make it even simpler and just sort of say, move to replace the design of the Cardinal Field project, blah, 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 present at the January 7th board special meeting with the phasing of the project as recommended by the architect. And then you sort of just take out all the little including parts. And,
I guess the confusion that could be caused by that is the architect presented a vision with the separate building. To Joe's point, the committee said the board could take up the discussion of whether they want it under the bleachers or the separate building. I think, Joe, you'd like us to have that discussion. I think we need to be clear in whatever design we're adopting. It's an either-or situation.
Well, I think there's a lot of work to be done still to make those decisions. So leaving it vague or leaving it multiple options would be probably the desired result.
I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. I might look to Russ to give us some guidance. Basically, the options were presented. I think the recommendation was the separate building. There were a couple of reasons for that, including digging. Rush again.
I think you're talking about the two things. It's a separate building in that it's not under the home side bleachers.
The visitor.
Right, but earlier, both functions were under the home side bleachers, so it's a separate building. The location of that separate building, I think, is undecided by the committee, and there's a couple of good options.
Right, so maybe you could just say location to be determined or something like that.
Exactly, location to be determined, and I think that's the issue.
But I guess the question is, who makes that determination? Wouldn't it be our board at this point?
No.
We're voting on a design. There's no building committee. This isn't a project that's getting state funding. We've gotten that definitively answered at this point. There's no money coming. So the question is, who's making that decision?
Well, is your question before my thing? Yeah, go, okay.
I don't know yet. Just because it came up at the meeting last week to talk about the expansion of the track, which was not originally part of this plan. If we vote on the plan as it was presented last week, I just want to confirm that we still have the option to expand the track, because that was a discussion and we didn't really resolve it or come to an answer. So what's the feasibility if we say, okay, we are going to expand the track? In sequencing, like, do we need to decide it beforehand or not?
Well, there's still design to be done, for sure. And the question is, expand the track how? To go to 8 lanes or to just change the footprint slightly to go to 400 meters over 400 yards. But it's very simple study to do, and it really has to do with where do you put the visitors' bleachers so you have the freedom to do that. And I think that is actually easy to decide how far to set back the visitors' bleachers so you can do whatever you want whenever you get money to do the track.
That doesn't answer the question, though, as to whether or not you put a visitor team room under the visitor bleachers or put a visitor team room in a separate building, with bathroom storage.
No, she asked a different question.
Yeah.
Right. What I had asked Russ for was guidance on the first.
Yeah, I mean, there's benefits to either one. I do think it's something that could use a little more study, and I share some others' concerns that we need to get engineers, we need to get the full team engaged, like we did for the home side on some of these things before we're going to know.
I'm sorry, before we get there. Peter, this is where the rubber meets the road, at least for me, and I think for some others, okay? I'll just say this in general, okay? This board's been screwing around with this project for 2 years, okay? It's the project that ate the Board of Education, okay? It's like, Russ is a wonderful guy. I realize how incredibly professional he is. I'm sure he's like, sitting in his office in Armonk going, I have to go meet with the Greenwich board. I'd rather stab pencils in my eyeballs. It would hurt less. Okay, but he would never say that because he and his firm are incredibly professional. I think we have to really, I think the good news is there seems to be a broad consensus in the board to do the whole project, right? That part's not open to debate, all right? I mean, there's parts of this project I don't like, but I will concede the point for comedy and move forward, right? C-O-M-I-T-Y, not M-E-D-Y. Although it feels like that, right? I think that we're now faced with this question, which is, and I don't know the answer to it, and I have opinions about it, but what is the concept or plan, once the board approves this, of who's going to go manage getting this thing done? Because it is a very big and complex project. So what did you have in mind, and what did maybe Joe and the committee have in mind? Because I know you were on the committee, and then you were on the committee, and what's the answer to that of how people thought this would actually get done, executed? With a committee, with an individual, with a what?
So first, the committee's advisory to the board.
I got that part.
Yeah, okay. So one of the models that we talked about with Russ, and Joe, you were involved in the conversation, was basically an owner's committee. So the way that New Lab works is there's a New Lab building committee. The entire building committee gets together. There's also what's called an owner's rep committee, and Russ, you probably can give more information about this, but basically, you would have our facilities director, maybe you'd have a board member, we'd probably have to hire a construction manager at risk, and then you might have the architect serve on that. That would be the body that would deal with the issues as they come up through construction. So that you would have that report back.
That's your proposal.
That seems to be the best proposal. The other way, Peter, is to handle it like we handle all other.
But wait a second, why is that the best proposal?
That is what most other projects use. We talked to Russ about it, and that was the recommendation. The other alternative is to treat it like other district projects and basically throw it to our facilities director who's already got X number of projects open, and it would be managed that way.
Why can't we use a building committee? I realize there's this whole debate, it's required by law, it's not required by law, therefore because we're not to state reimbursement, I don't get that part. I'm on this part of, if it's a model that works, I don't care whether it's mandated by state or not. If it's a model that works, why is that model not on the table?
I would say the majority of the work that's done at a school building committee is actually done by the rep committee rather than the committee itself. That would make us the committee of the whole. It would be responsible to come back to us to report issues, questions, concerns, but that committee would be responsible for the day-to-day management of the project. Maybe Russ, you can talk.
But I'm in this place, I'm sorry, I don't understand, and I need your help. You were the board's representative on New Lebanon, so you might be able to help us understand this. I'm wondering why, in that one, I'm not into who appoints it, right? I don't want to go off into all these crazy discussions about, well, we don't control it. I'm just wondering why that isn't the right model. Why it isn't the right model to have a community member as a, like, I'm trying to think of his name, the guy Perkins and Will, who was so great helping us on New Lab. Brian. Why we wouldn't go say, hey, Brian, and an engineering and a construction person and what have you, and we wouldn't bring together some community members and tap, say, hey, could you help us out on a building committee for this thing? And of course, we're always the owner, so they always have to come back to us for approval of decisions and what have you. Why wouldn't we put together a nice cadre of the right kind of people to help guide and shepherd this project?
I also sat on the New Lab Building Committee as the RTM representative, and they had spending authority, the building committee. Right, but then I think it creates a burdensome process, because then they have to make a decision, they have to come back. I think it will prolong the construction by creating a layer of, and bureaucracy isn't the right word, it slows down decision-making to the extent decisions need to be made on a timely basis, is my food for thought.
Here's my concern, okay? And no offense to anybody here, but to the degree I know our backgrounds, okay? I don't know anybody on this committee. I mean, somebody tell me they did a project at their house, or somebody tell me they were an investor and kind of involved in building buildings. But no offense amongst the 8 of us, I don't know anybody here. Hold up your hand if you have experience, direct experience, building a complex project like a stadium. I mean, has somebody...
It's kind of hard to find, Peter, somebody who's built a stadium.
This is, therein lies my point. So I'm wondering why we're not trying to put together a group of people. And no offense to Russ. Russ, how many stadiums have you built in Connecticut? I understand New York. How many have you built in Connecticut?
This will be our first.
Okay. The rules and laws are different. They're close, but the rules and laws are different, right? My only point is, I'm not taking anything away from Russ. I think we obviously need our architect involved. I'm just wondering why we aren't assembling a committee of people who are the right people, right stakeholders, who we can give this thing to and say, please manage this for us.
Joe, and then Russ, I do want to hear from you on kind of models.
I agree. I think we should bring some local experts onto a committee, a smaller committee, not necessarily a very large committee, so that might not slow it as much as the one, Christina, you made reference to. An owners committee, certainly we should have representation on that, but certainly bringing experts on could not hurt the advancement of this project. I agree.
Russ, maybe you can give us
So governance of projects has all different models. Building committee in Connecticut, and we do a lot of Connecticut work, is sort of a term of art for town and Board of Ed cooperative committees where there's state reimbursement. We're doing a major project in Stamford, no committee involved there. It's administered by the facilities group in the city of Stamford. That's a $30 million complicated project.
Yeah, but that's the city of Stamford's facilities department.
Yeah.
I wish we were that big.
It's more of our experience that you have a sort of trimmed down committee that involves users. In this case, I would think it would be the athletic director would certainly be involved, director of facilities would definitely be involved, usually a board member, someone from the business office is typically leading it. A community member or two is fine. But I think that you need to be mindful that it does need to be streamlined so that it doesn't bog down. I think that we're up to option H or I or J, and this should be about how to get this one done quickly. And I don't think there are a real lot of decisions left. Perhaps the location of the visitors building is the one that is left.
I guess, go ahead.
On the current committee, or advisory committee, don't we have all those groups represented? We have the BET represented, we have the Board of Ed represented. We have more. I don't know if they've disbanded, have they?
Yes.
We thank them for their work.
Okay, so we could, we'll ask some back. I mean, that's not the, because these are people who already have knowledge about the project. or you streamline it down, to Russ's point, you take a smaller, I don't know how many were at the meetings, you could take a smaller subset of that group and make that the advisory committee with the facility. I don't know, my thinking would be we have a board representative, we have a BET representative, we have a couple of community people, and then we basically, because it is a facility, it's not a building like a school building. We don't have ed specs in the same way. We can make anything. I mean, if we want to spend the time and the money, but I think I think everybody's goal, at least me personally, and I think many of the people in this room, is how can we make this project happen as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I don't think a building committee is the way to go. I think a streamlined version of the existing committee, to me, seems like the ideal as an.
Whatever you want to call it. My only point, Peter, was, here's the thing. Our administration does not have the capacity to manage this project. Let's call a spade, okay? Our athletic director has an athletic program to run, okay? I realize he's interested in what goes on in Cardinal Stadium. We cannot have him not doing his job and doing Cardinal Stadium, okay? We cannot have our new CFO, who has a whole ton of stuff to do that. We cannot ask for more capital dollars in our maintenance program. Oh, by the way, now I gotta go do a field over at CMS, and oh, by the way, I have to have somebody watch what's going on at Julian Curtis. And this idea that we're gonna take these people and just put all this work on their back, it's crazy, okay? So we have to put together a team of people who can own this project and execute this project. And I'm concerned. I don't care I don't want a committee of 20 people. I'm with you, okay? I don't think this idea, because I keep asking this question and all I keep hearing is the same names, and the same names are all of the administration and a board person and one other and our retained architect. And candidly, I think that's the wrong composition. We need a set of people who can keep eyeballs on this thing, because what we're doing is we're asking for a project that, to your point, is not specified to the nth degree. That should have been done. It wasn't done, okay? We have a lot of moving parts. We have endless community debates about what can go in this phase, what can go in that phase. It should be 2 phases. No, can I actually make it 3? Should it be 4? This is what I care about. I'm signed up to the concept, guys. We're about to go ask for the money, all right? And I don't care whether this is 1 phase, 2 phase, 6 phases. I want the thing built as quickly as possible. And for us to sit around, the 8 of us, and sit here and talk about phases, not our job. I think it has to be, here's a committee of people, talented people who know what the hell they're doing. They can work with the architect because they're community people and they are competent in their area. Put it in their hands. Tell them to keep building it, and then come give us status or ask us questions we need answered. I don't want this thing to be, yet again, now we're going to approve it. It's going to be, oh, could we have another 3-hour discussion about the placement of the building? Oh, could we have another 3-hour debate about whether wetlands is a regulated area or not? Candidly, I don't think anybody here is qualified to have that conversation. I want to put in a management model that says we're approving the project. We're putting together a group of people. It's the right group of people, and let them go away and implement the project as quickly as they can and tell us what they need. I don't want this thing back here every single time. I'm just one of 8, but that's how I look at this project.
Mr. Kelly.
I think we all agree that a efficient, a targeted, a focused group is probably the best group to run this project. Do we want to make that determination tonight, or do we want to put that off to another time to decide what group is going to run this project?
We obviously can't decide it tonight, but what I want to do is, before we jump off the cliff, I do want it on the record of, because we've avoided this question of how this thing was actually going to be managed. If the suggestion here is that there is going to be a committee created, okay, and the committee is going to include, preferably from the community, people doing it pro bono for us, working with Russ and others to help guide and steer the project, right? My question's answered. If the answer is it's going to be Russ and the administrators and 1 board rep, then I don't think that's the right answer.
So we'll continue this discussion and move on to.
Can I ask Russ, when you've done these various projects, it could be in New York or in Connecticut, has been the person running the project?
It's usually the director of facilities or someone from the business office.
Thank you.
But to that end, I think the point here is that, one, do they have the capacity to do this, particularly when we're going to be having another project come up along the way with the fields? But I think the goal here is to have a strategic committee put together so that the board's mandate is, here's the project we're handing you, get it done as quickly as possible. And with their combined intelligence and getting it through, then they can help make decisions as to, we want to get this phase done as quickly as possible, and we can get that through. And they're coordinating with wetlands, and they're coordinating with the zoning department and any other approvals that need to go, because they could get kicked back, right? We have a plan that we're not quite sure, that first of all hasn't been put before them, that they could kick back because they don't like a particular something. And then what does it come back to us? I think it needs to come back to this committee that has the wherewithal to make those decisions quickly and say, well, if we cut out this, does it get us where we need to go to get the stadium built? And if the answer to that is yes, then perfect. I think that's the goal of this committee.
So I'd like to get back to where we were, which is actually about the design.
We can go ahead and do it, because I'm on this. Peter, let me jump ahead. I want to take out these references to phases. And the reason I want to take out the references to phases is we don't know if it's 1 or 2 phases or it's 4 phases. We don't know. Everybody's been making their own phone calls. I made my own phone calls. I couldn't get the damn answer on what's the story with wetlands and what's the story with planning and zoning and how the thing needs to be put in chunks. Guess what I found out? No offense, Russ. I found out, the people planning zoning think there can be phase 1 because they think this area that's handicapped is already paved and just needs to be restriped. Newsflash. That's not a parking lot, it's gravel. Okay, so this is my point where I feel like we're making decisions on not great information, but this board is never gonna run those to ground. We need to put this in the hands of a project team who can go deal with these issues and run them to ground. There's a debate, as an example, that's broken out of building in phase 2 or phase 1. Let's let the building committee figure that out. Why are we trying to figure that out?
That's our job, but Ms. Stowe.
Russ, since you've been here since, God bless you, 7 o'clock, can you tell us what you know, if you've spoken to anyone, and enlighten us a little bit about the process, wetlands, anything, what you've learned?
We spoke to planning, Connecticut DOT, and wetlands. And that's why we came up with this Part 1, Part 2 plan. Because in our evaluation, and it was confirmed in a discussion as recently as this morning, that once you start to work, to apply for work in the regulated area of the wetlands, you're going to have to look at all the work that's anticipated in the regulated area of the wetlands. That's not ambiguous. That's the interpretation of the person currently running that department. And we understand that other people could disagree with that, but that's her interpretation. You respect it, and that's why we're suggesting you group that in one application, separate from the other, so that they can go at their own speeds. So if the one gets a little slowed down with the wetlands, you can get the bleachers done.
Yes.
And if during that application process, if we find the relocation of the tennis courts and the extension of the driveway becomes so difficult so that it might not even be approved, you can pull that from that application and proceed with just the visitor side, bleachers, and building. But if you wrap it all up in one, you could get the whole thing stopped for the wetlands. So that's why we're, as best as you can tell from now, and there's always something new that can happen, but that's probably the best way to proceed to get this done quickly.
Thank you. I'm going to rely on you being an expert and speaking to our current town people, and I'd like to amend the motion to read the following. Move to replace the design of the Cardinal Field project, option B, as voted on at the February 22nd, 2018 board business meeting with the design presented at the January 7, 2019 board special meeting. I'm keeping it all, I'm just making one modification, including the separate building on the visitor side with a location to be determined, new driveway and bridge to connect to high school parking lot, and the phasing of the project as recommended by the architect.
Is there a second for that amendment? Ms. Downey, discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the amendment? On the phone?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay, so unanimous. All right, so the motion on the table, yeah.
Move to authorize the superintendent to pursue
Well, you got to vote on that motion. So the motion on the table is as amended by Ms. Stowe.
Yes, sorry.
All right. Any further discussion on that motion? All right, so the amended motion's on the table. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right, so that's 8-0. Thank you. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Second motion. I'd move to authorize the superintendent to pursue simultaneous municipal improvement applications and land use and other required regulatory approvals for the 2 phases of the Cardinal Stadium project.
Is there a second for that motion? Ms. Downey?
I'd like to amend. I'd like to motion as Ms. Stowe read, strike, ended at as required for other regulatory approvals. I don't think we should talk about phases because if there turn out to be more than one phase, we've handicapped ourselves. Let's just say move to authorize the superintendent to pursue municipal improvement applications and land use and other required regulatory approvals. Whichever. I don't think we need the word simultaneous, and I don't think we need the qualifier at the end. Just authorize the superintendent to request the MI and land use necessary for this project, to your point.
Is there a second for that amendment? All right. Ms. Downey. Well,
Only because it hamstrings, and if, for example, we have a problem, if we decide it becomes a 3-phase project, we have to come back, and that would just as a technical matter.
So I do want to point out, though, I think we need to be very specific that we want this filed as separate municipal improvements. It doesn't have to be simultaneous, but I think you need to say it can be more than one.
Well, what if we just strike the number 2 out? If we just strike, no, but I'm just saying, if we strike the word 2 and just say, rather than his motion, if you just take out the word 2, if you leave it all the same except take out the number 2, I don't know, that covers us.
I disagree. I like the motion as I put forth. I think that we've spent a lot of time on this. The architect came to us with very specific phasing. If, God forbid, something changes, well, then let's take another board vote. We're obviously changing our option B plan as we speak. So then let's talk about it then. But right now, let's go forward with what we have on the table and get going.
Further discussion? All right, so all those in favor of Mr. Scher's motion to amend?
It doesn't matter. I'll withdraw it. I don't care.
Well, there was a second on it, so.
I'm withdrawing the motion.
Okay, Mr. Scher's withdrawing the motion, so we're back to the motion as presented by Ms. Stowe. Move to authorize the superintendent to pursue simultaneous municipal improvement, and as it's written on the sheet. Any further discussion? All those in favor? On the phone?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
All right, so it passes 7-1. Mr. Scher is in the negative. All right. So, Mr. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Move to adjust the capital request for the Cardinal Stadium project voted on at the December 19, 2020 board business meeting from $4.5 million to $8.1 million. Total cost of the project $11.9 million, less the $3.8 million remaining balance from the 2019-2020 authorization, based upon the design presented at the January 7, 2020 board special meeting. I'll keep going, although I don't think the next part is necessary. Then I'm going to stop.
Is there a second for that? Ms. Downey, discussion? And so just to be clear, this is to actually ask for the full amount. As I said earlier, the first selectman has informed us that he's already adjusted the number in the budget at his own, on his own authority, but it would be good if we were also aligned to that. Adjusted it to the to the balance of the 8.1. So the 8.1, which would bring the total number to the 11.9.
So he's already moved it to the full budget, the full project.
Right, and I think it would behoove us to support that. Any further discussion? All those in favor? On the phone?
Aye. Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Peter, just to clarify, you're stopping the motion at January 7th?
7th board special meeting. Yeah, the rest is striking the rest.
Okay, making sure.
Great, thank you. All right, so Russ, thank you. We appreciate all your efforts. We'd like to see this move with deliberate speed.
We'll help you get it done.
Awesome. Get those MIs filed. All right. Next up is our financial and staffing report. Mr. O'Keefe. Can we get a motion to accept the report? Ms. Downey moves to accept. Is there a second? Is there a second? I'll second your motion to accept the report. And we'll let
Good evening, everybody. I'm used to it. In Trumbull, it's the exact same way. The financial report's at the end, and there's like 3 people left.
Is that intentional, by the way, that it's at the end of a meeting?
I can text you. All right, I'll be brief. Staffing, you all have the reports, right?
Yep.
On the staffing report, there's no change from the last report. Overall, the impact prior to Evolve is 8.5 plus versus budget, which is all driven by the 3 additional preschool classrooms due to enrollment. The next couple of charts are the status of the vacancies and year-to-date contracts greater than 100K, little to no change from last month. The general fund revenue accounts, the budget is 896,000. Year-to-date actual 847. So I would expect that we'll probably exceed that. Operating accounts, overall the roll-up right now of the full year forecast indicates we've got a potential exposure of about 860,000. It's primarily driven by sped outplaced tuition and sped transportation, and partly offset by savings that we've already reflected in maintenance and utilities. To offset this exposure, we're reviewing a number of accounts for savings opportunities, including HVAC, utilities, transportation, overtime limitations, excess cost reimbursement, and not backfilling open vacancies. As far as grants go, all grants are now in and recorded in Munis. The total of the grants received, 7.8 million. The spending is already occurring by the grant managers. So to date, the spending and encumbrances total 4.1, leaving 3.7 million to go. To food services, we're projecting to achieve the budgeted revenue and expense for the year. Capital, a lot of progress has been made since the last report. For full year 15 projects and full year 16 projects, we've closed them all, and money given back to the town. Full year 17, the balance as of January 7th was 112K. Today we closed out 106 of that, so full year 17 is just about all closed up. Leaves us with 18, 19, and 20. For full year 18 projects, we're down to about $3.2 million of available funds. 19, full year 19, 7,000,004, and for 1920, 20.6 million. So again, a lot of progress made thanks to the facilities team for helping us out there. There were no budget transfers needing to be announced or approved by the board, but I did want to clarify the policy on budget transfers. It goes transfers greater than $10,000, moving from one major object code to another requires Board of Ed approval. Transfers greater than $10,000 that are within the same major object code just need to be announced at the board meeting, but Board of Ed action is not necessary. So that's the report. Any questions?
One, please commend everybody that's worked on the capital projects. I have been beaten up the last 2 years at the BET Budget Committee meeting.
Where's Dan?
Deservedly so. We've been beaten up, but I feel like I'm the one usually sitting on the hot seat for open budget items in capital. We account obviously for a large part of the town budget, and it is phenomenal to see the work that's gone on. The fact that now we're down to a tiny little portion of 17 and 18 is coming down fast. So
6,000 left in 17.
yeah, congratulations. I mean, that's great work. So let me go to the other area of concern then. Special ed. I mean, this has been, I know there's little control in this area, but as we're now approaching $1 million, I'm just wondering where we think we're going to find these magic funds to close this gap.
Well, as I said, we're looking at a number of accounts. We've already identified over 100,000 in facilities, and I do believe we will definitely get some savings in transportation. As you know, I'm exploring the excess cost reimbursement. I do believe we can make some headway there, and continuing to look at scrub everything. We're not letting anything go. We gotta close this gap, plain and simple.
I guess as we sit here, I know it's January 16th, so there's more of the year to go, but is it possible this number is going to keep growing?
There is always a possibility. I asked Mary Ford that question, that between January and April, there is the potential for outplaced tuition to increase by a few hundred K.
Mr. Scherer.
Two questions, but I want to come back to special education. One question is, I'm sorry, with all the puts and takes, how much capital do we have out there now? What's the total number?
The available balance of all the capital?
All of it.
About 26 million.
26 million, okay, because the BT's walking around quoting numbers as 50, some,
I have
I should
all
say
that,
that,
sure.
some BET members are walking around, not the one in the room, walking around quoting $50 million. Okay, so the sooner that gets straightened out, the better.
It's 26.
Is it, which by the way is 2 years maintenance capital. It's 2 years maintenance
Yeah.
capital.
Right.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
It'd be
it's-
better if we could do better, but.
That's the available balance, that 26 figure that I gave you.
Right.
And that includes building committee projects, which are multi-year, obviously.
There's no overhang left for new.
No, because it's not fully.
Right.
Like, it's the retainage and stuff.
Right, okay. So, and then my other question, I guess, is to you, Peter, is we talked about having a meeting in executive session to review. When is that happening?
That is actually the 30th. That's our next meeting. We're going to take up, I have the agenda plan in front of me. Actually, I guess if we can close this out first, then we.
Well, the only reason I'm asking is I feel an intense urgency on that because I thought we were going to be talking about the 5 million that was requested going forward. And I thought we had a grip on this right now. What I'm hearing right now is, obviously you're not, it's a forecasting question, right? And it's a, to what degree can you commit the forecast? You've been here a whole 30 seconds, so I wouldn't commit the forecast if I were
Commit the
you either.
forecast for?
Special ed settlements and out-of-district placements.
All I can tell you is I've been doing this for 40 years and I
Yeah.
know how to close gaps.
Yeah,
I've
that
closed
wasn't my
$1 million
question.
gaps.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. I think the source of
That wasn't
is-
in trouble.
The source of that is a process problem underneath that makes it hard to have that thing be more predictable than it has been.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Tony and you will get your arms around that. But every time I bring up this number to 5 million, people gasp. So I'm just worried. I'll wait till the 30th, but I know, but I'm feeling like only 2 weeks. Around this place, it can happen in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that number goes up.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Any other questions for Mr. O'Keefe? Yeah, Ms. Kowalski?
Oh, sure, thanks. So with respect to the special ed funding, is it possible to, I mean, we have a $900,000 gap currently, it's January. You're anticipating more for April. Is it possible between now and April to get a forecast of what we anticipate that additional spend to be that's going to be an overage for that time?
I think that's hard to say at this point. I mean, it's basically, it's that number that Mary Ford and I discussed that. My question to her is, what's your trend been for the January to April period? If it's known, we would bake it into the forecast already. But trend says about $300,000.
More. An
More.
additional
Exactly.
above the 9.
Sorry?
Above the 9?
Above the 900.
And so that 900, I'm sorry, just to make sure, we put a couple $100,000 extra in our budget for this current school year above where we were in previous years. So this is above and beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is out of control.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, sorry, welcome, but when I got on the board, you guys complained a lot about that, and I was kind of like, enough. Now I'm sort of on your train.
Welcome aboard.
This has got to end. We started the meeting unhappy, and we're ending the meeting with the same issue unhappy. And I have to say, I know it's like a unfunded mandate, but we've got to somehow stop this because it's just taking away from every other
And by the way,
program.
when I mean out of control, I mean it in the financial sense. I don't mean it in the, like it's a car, I suppose it is a car crash. It's just not within control. It's not within, it's given, it's a river that's busted its banks. So it's a management problem, and we just got to get our arms around it to the degree we can.
Ms. Kowalski?
Can I ask a question?
Hang on, Megan, 1 second.
1 second. So would I value the fact that you can close $1 million gaps. My concern is
Billion.
I'm sorry. Wow.
Here's a cape.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
I would actually like to know where we're getting the million. It's going to be $1.3 million, right? Where is that coming from? I would really like to know what programs have the extra money, because I'd like to see that breakdown, because my concern is where we're taking it from, and I want to be accountable to the program. I feel like the board needs to be accountable to the programs that we're taking money away from to fund the deficit. And that's a problem to me, because I'm concerned that we're taking things away from other kids, that those programs we really need, and I want to know where that money is, and we just need a breakdown of it.
So to Ms. Kowalski's point, our practice has been, at least for our last budget director's here, she was, during the course of the year, making those budget transfers to keep that number in check, and we were seeing the visibility of where that money was coming from. But it also created conversations about, why are we moving money across lines? We're adding into special ed, where can we maybe have savings within that program to help cover? It's a big number. Sadly, sounds like it's getting bigger.
Well, we have to be fair to, just as an aside, we have to be fair to Tony. We have to be fair to it's a new staff, right? They're executing a budget that somebody else did, right? So, and as you know, when you go into an organization and somebody else had a theory of how they were doing it, so you really own the next one. In the meantime, you obviously own this one, but you get some level of
I own this
pass.
All right.
I do own this one.
Thank you.
I take ownership.
Yeah, Ms. Olson.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I just want to make sure I have this correct, because I think I heard we're $1,900,000 on board to be $1.3 million over budget, specifically in special education out of district tuition, and that this, I think I heard somebody say it's like a management leadership problem. Couldn't agree more. We started off, like Kathleen, like Ms. Soa said, we started off the meeting with a lot of concerns about leadership and management in special education. I know we're ending on the same note. I can't get behind this just based on the fact that some out-of-district tuition can be avoided if without predetermination, without all the concerns that started the meeting. So I think very concerning, and I'm not going to be able to vote for this for that particular reason. I think that Mary Ford and our leadership needs to have more accountability in my mind.
Thank you.
Sorry, this is Karen. I just sort of wanted to second what Ms. Olson was saying, that, we have seriously grave concerns and our numbers in this area keep increasing. I'm very much looking forward to our meeting to discuss this, but I have grave concerns continuing every month to just approve these numbers without seeing what the basis behind them.
All right, Ms. Kowalski.
So just to harken back to a point that I think Peter had raised earlier about the deep dive and the audit into special ed and identifying the scope. I think one of the things that we need to consider for purposes of the scope is in fact all of the expenditures and getting a grip on where they're going. And I think that will help us control from the top as to where we're spending this money and how we're spending it. So I think the scope clearly has to include a financial component to this and the overages, because there's got to be a better way to manage it. And so include that in part of the deep dive audit that we intend to do.
All right, anything further? All right. All those in favor of accepting the financial and staffing report? On the phone? On the phone?
Nay.
Karen?
Oh. Nay.
All right, well, it passes. Right, passes 6-2. All right, Joe, do you have a motion to make? Oh, wait, agenda planning, sorry. I'll get you. All right, agenda planning. So, yes, we are meeting on the 30th. Just so you know, before the 30th, on the 23rd, which is next Thursday night, the budget, the town budget with the schools included, is being presented to the BET that night, the BET Budget Committee. So Dr. Jones and I will be presenting along with Fred Camillo. On the 30th, we have our full day BET Budget Committee hearing. I believe we start at 9, and I think we have a hard stop at 4, and then that evening we have our meeting. So it's going to be a long day for some of us. All board members are encouraged to come and attend and join us and show your support for our budget. That evening, we're going to take up a discussion, get some updates on the fields at the high school in Western. Hopefully hear a little bit more about the devising seminar process. Strategic plan I've got penciled in, Peter, so if there's discussion items, and then we'll go into executive session and get a deeper dive on special education. Yes, the executive session will be at the end of the meeting. So that way we can have it open and then we'll sweep everybody out of the room.
Peter, I'm confused.
Yes, sir.
The SPED is on the 30th, right?
Yep.
When's the executive session? At the end?
The executive session will be at the end because we're also going to get an update
good. We're
on...
going to be so sharp.
Well, we're getting an update on the fields. We wanted to hear about the devising seminar and key to ed. So that was a night to do that, although we heard something about that tonight.
So how do we frame out what we want?
I would say...
I'm looking for deep information to understand. I'm not looking to just get information to go one way or the other on this thing. I'm looking at this as, I want deep education about what this is and how this works and how people are doing these things and whatever. And I want it in real examples. So I want to know, where did all that money go? I want it all broken down. And then I'm going to have questions about individual decisions that were made. That's why we have to do it in an executive session, because a lot of that information is confidential and private. But my question is, how do we get to a place where, to make that meeting is what, who's coming and presenting?
So I'll ask the
I presume
superintendent
it's
that,
the
but what I
town
would say,
attorney,
I would say to
right?
make it the most useful meeting it can be, email your questions to the superintendent in advance. You'll have to tell us who you're going to have at the meeting.
Yeah, obviously, I'll be in the executive session. Sean, also Mary Ford, and we have an attorney coming as well. Actually, Mary, what's the name of the?
Attorneys?
If you don't mind.
Are they town lawyers?
Since Andy, Abby Wadler will come from the town, so she's the one that usually sits on most of them. Andy Belloc will be coming, who can also speak to you on some of the cases she's carried, but also on the state perspective of what's happening in the rest of the states. You can put what happens here in context of what's going on.
Me personally, that's too big for me. I'd like this, we need a separate discussion on state and all the rest of that and so on and so forth. Andy, by the way, helpful, but has a strong opinion one way or the other. I'm interested in this meeting and if just me personally, I want to spend the time to get to the fact base. We can have a discussion about justifications and why and all the rest of it in a separate meeting. I think we need to get to use this meeting in a more confined way just to say, there was this money, tell me exactly how it was spent, and I want to talk about why that was spent. I don't know if you guys agree, I don't want to drift off into a general conversation justifying the decisions that were made.
Yeah, we will be sharing with you exactly how those tuition dollars are spent, so that you can actually see, what does it cost for tuition at a particular school, and how that actually impacts when you add up 20 students times 100,000, or what those dollar amounts are. You'll be able to see that.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yeah, I just want to make, the focus of the meeting on the 30th, I don't care what the rest of the state's doing. I don't care what any other school district is doing. I care about what this school district is doing. And I think before we start extrapolating out as to what everybody else does, I think this board needs to get a strong handle on what this district does. Before we start comparing and being able to ask our questions, it's just too much information at one point in time and it won't be effective.
I don't think the intent was for us to do comparative analysis in that regard. It's really just if we have an issue that rises to that next level, why do we have to make the decisions that we make? What are some of the criteria that go into that? And just keep in mind that we do have a town attorney, but she is not a special education attorney. And there are challenges that rise to the level where you need special education expertise, and that's why we were going to have them both there.
Yeah, but Tony, I guess I agree with what Karen's saying. I want to start with, we budgeted, tell me what happened with that money. Then separately, we can have a discussion. I just want to know, I want the detailed breakdown, and I only want the people in the room who were the participants in those actual cases that made those. If Andy litigated some of those cases for us, and they're in there, and she can speak specifically to, here's what happened in this case, great, put her in the room. If she's not, and by the way, if there's an attorney missing if there are cases that we're gonna see that are on the list that somebody can't answer about, we should figure out how to get that person in the room too. I only want to do this once personally, but I want to understand if we're just taking last year, and it was 5 million last year, or what's happened so far this year. I just want the detail behind that.
Christina?
Me personally.
I know you said it that we're doing, I'm hearing about it, it's something we all really want to talk about, whether we could flip-flop the order of the meeting. I'm just saying, if it's something we all really care about and we all feel like we're going to be kind of tired by the end if we talk, and I know that's not great for the public who want, but nobody gets to comment, right?
Well, it's bad in a couple of respects. So we'll have, I think you're going to have Langen and maybe Amy Siebert there, so we have outsiders coming to talk about the fields. We also don't know how long the executive session is going to take. It's why you don't do it at the beginning.
No, I was just trying to think.
No, I hear you. I just logistically, we want to make sure we have the public portion of the meeting. So, all right, that's it on agenda planning. Mr. Kelly.
This is Karen. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yes?
It's Karen. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
My big concern is that we have this meeting that we're going to be tackling
really important topic. Special education, executive session that we were looking for, things on Key 2E, as well as our strategic plan on it after a full day of BET hearings. And so if those go, I know they say have a hard stop at 4, but is that going to give enough time for any of the administration that needs to be prepared to come to our meeting? And then for those of us who are going to be in that meeting all day,
It doesn't matter if it's that day or another
I want to make sure
day.
we leave enough time because these are two really important topics.
That's just the way the schedule fell, unfortunately. We're going to have to power through. I would say bring your own snacks.
I always do. But I will say, I do want to mirror what Mr. Sharon Kowalski was saying as well, saying that I feel like for our executive session, we really do need to focus on our overages. We've asked about settlements, why we're outplacing students. Is it because we can't serve them or aren't? Then, once we have a lot of that data or information and discussion pieces, we can see how we compare elsewhere, but it's important to really know what we're doing in our own district and how our money is being spent. We've asked, so I'd like to focus on what we're doing here first.
Okay, gotcha. All right, Mr. Kelly, please, before somebody else says something.
I would like to make a motion.
Is there a second?
Adjourn.
Mr. Seconds, all those in favor, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.